2021 P4G 서울 녹색 미래 정상회의에 함께해 주신 각국의 정상과 국제기구 대표 여러분 진심으로 환영합니다. 녹색 회복을 통한 탄소 중립 비전의 실현과 지속 가능한 성장을 논의하는 귀중한 자리에서 오프닝 발언을 맡게 되어 대단히 영광스럽게 생각합니다. 최근 인류는 전례 없는 위기와 마주하고 있습니다. 비단 코로나19 팬데믹뿐만 아니라 역사상 가장 긴 장마와 폭우, 기록적인 한파와 폭설, 극심한 가뭄과 초대형 산불까지 지구촌 전체가 기후위기로 고통을 받고 있습니다. 이제 기후위기는 인류의 미래뿐 아니라 우리의 일상을 위협하고 있습니다. 바로 지금이 우리 모두가 담대한 행동에 나서야 할 때입니다. 코로나19로부터의 포용적 녹색 회복, 2050 탄소 중립 달성, 기후 행동을 위한 민관 협력은 모든 국가에게 도전적인 과제입니다. 무엇보다도 한 국가나 정부의 노력만으로는 이뤄낼 수 없는 그런 목표입니다. 그러나 결코 회피하거나 미룰 수 없는 인류사적 과제이기도 합니다. 이번 코로나19 위기에서 우리 모두가 배운 것은 지구와 우리 인류 전체는 하나로 연결되어 있으며 감염병과 기후위기 등 앞으로의 과제는 전 세계가 함께 협력할 때만 해결할 수 있다는 사실입니다. 이 과제를 추진하는 과정에서 어느 누구도 소외되거나 뒤떨어지지 않도록 정부, 국제기구, 기업, 시민사회가 손을 맞잡고 함께해야 우리의 목표에 한 걸음 한 걸음 더 가까이 다가갈 수 있습니다. 이것이 P4G 파트너십의 핵심이고 우리 모두가 함께 모인 이유입니다. 오늘 회의에서는 반기문 전 유엔 사무총장님께서 코로나19로부터의 포용적 녹색 회복, 이회성 IPCC 의장님께서 탄소 중립을 향한 국제사회의 공동 노력, 임기택 IMO 사무총장님께서 기후행동 강화를 위한 민관 협력 확산 노력이라는 세 가지 주제에 대해 말씀해 주시겠습니다. 전 지구적 거버넌스와 그 실천 방안을 모색하는 소중한 기회가 될 것입니다. 올해는 파리 기후협약 이행의 원년입니다. 앞으로의 10년은 지난 세기 인류가 배출한 온실가스의 재앙을 미래를 위한 희망으로 바꿔나갈 대전환의 시간이 될 것입니다. 우리 P4G 회원국들이 긴밀한 국제협력을 통해서 기후위기 대응을 선도할 수 있기를 진정으로 기대합니다. 대한민국은 2021 P4G 서울 녹색미래 정상회의 개최국으로서 개발도상국의 포용적 녹색 회복과 탄소 중립 달성을 위한 국제적 연대가 더욱 굳건해지도록 아낌없이 지원하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for opening the Leaders Session 1 today with the participation of more than 50 leaders. And tomorrow, we are expected to have the Leaders Session 2 chaired by President Moon Jae-in. Having said that, hi everybody, as Ambassador for the Climate Change of the Republic of Korea, it is the highest honor and the greatest privilege for me to moderate today's session. Although we are unable to meet in person in the context of COVID-19, I'm so excited to be here to listen to the speeches of leaders from more than 50 countries and international organizations represented here at the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit. I'm also excited to introduce two gentlemen joining this session. Mr. Yannick Lemarek, Executive Director of the Green Climate Fund, headquartered in Songdo, Korea, and Dr. Frank Riversman, Director General of the Global Green Growth Institute, based in Seoul, Korea. A warm welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
We all know that this summit is full of stories transcend boundaries as climate change is transnational in nature. If you can select a key word that represents the summit held here in Korea, what would be your choice?
With the summit being held in Korea this year, I think I would choose Green New Deal. Korea's Green New Deal strategy to achieve its 2050 targets for carbon neutrality is exactly the type of transformational plan we need and that can serve as a model for other countries, especially the focus on public-private partnership.
Green we go, Yeonchul, is the key word I believe represents this summit and the time we live in. It appears the pandemic has, for so many more people, been a wake-up call that our economies are not sustainable, and going green is now a must.
I'm sure the leaders' speeches will contain more intriguing and insightful keywords on climate. The speeches from more than 50 countries and international organizations are divided into 3 themes. And the door to each of these themes will be opened by former and the incumbent heads of international organizations. The first theme we are about to explore is green recovery, and the message and the questions on green recovery will be first delivered by His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, the 8th UN Secretary General and the incumbent President and Chairman of GGGI.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I warmly welcome you all to the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit. I'm happy to join you to introduce the guiding question of ensuring an inclusive green recovery for all people and our planet that we will be discussing for the next 2 days. Today, we currently face dual global challenges of an unprecedented scale, COVID-19 and climate change. These are both urgent in nature and simultaneously critical to our daily livelihoods. They are also both inherently global and, as such, require robust multilateral solidarity. In the midst of these crises, however, I do see a light illuminating our way forward. Indeed, we now have a window of opportunity to set things right. To do so, we simply must build back better by greening our recovery from the pandemic. I cannot overemphasize the importance of our firm commitment to this end. We also need to make certain that our responses are inclusive, leaving no one behind, while we elevate sustainability in all spheres and pursue a green recovery. Scaling up inclusivity during this process is particularly important for developing countries, women, vulnerable populations, and the future generations. Investing in green industries and making the necessary green transition will not only create new jobs, but will also help our economies gain a future-oriented competitive edge and be more resilient. Perhaps most importantly, this will also construct a robust foundation for us to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals and implement the Paris Climate Change Agreement. These were my 2 biggest achievements as United Nations Secretary General, and I believe they also represent the 2 most significant multilateral agreements to help steer humanity and our planet towards a sustainable, inclusive, secure, and prosperous future. Under this backdrop, I'm honored to now cordially invite you to share your views on the efforts we can make to pursue an inclusive green recovery from COVID-19 and the areas of cooperation among the international community to deliver green recovery. I take this opportunity to wish you all a successful P4G summit, and I thank you for your ongoing actions to help realize an inclusive green recovery for all. Thank you.
Now, we are going to watch video messages from the leaders who will address green recovery as a commitment to restoring our ecosystem and preserving our environment. The countries and international organizations that will deliver the speech are United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, People's Republic of China, United Nations, Republic of Indonesia, Republic of Uzbekistan, People's Democratic Republic of Algeria, UN Environment Programme, Jamaica, Mongolia, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, Nepal, Republic of Rwanda, C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, Republic of Senegal, Republic of Singapore, UN Convention to Combat Desertification, Convention on Biological Diversity, International Civil Aviation Organization, International Maritime Organization, International Union for Conservation of Nature, Asian Forest Cooperation Organization.
As COP26 draws closer, I'm delighted to see so many of my fellow world leaders taking such a positive stance in the fight against climate change. Our hosts today, for example, the Republic of Korea, have committed to achieving net zero by 2050. President Moon has also pledged, like the UK, to end international coal finance, and we recently learned that through the G7, Japan will be taking concrete steps to do the same. Around the world, in every continent, rich and poor nations alike have been putting forward ambitious emissions targets. And the wealthiest countries are getting increasingly serious about first hitting and then exceeding our climate finance promises. It's a great start, but let's not pat ourselves on the back just yet, because our planet and our people need more. More ambition, more innovation, more action, and yes, more money. We need NDCs that match those net zero commitments. We need an end to dirty old coal fueling our power grids. And we need governments that will not just make promises on climate and nature, but match those words with deeds. That's why the UK is making a massive investment in R&D and science, developing technology that will both slash emissions and create jobs. That's why by the end of this decade, we'll harness enough offshore wind to power every home in the United Kingdom. And it's why we're working hand in hand with business to deliver our 10-point plan for a greener economy. We have to do all this because even the most committed government cannot bring about a green industrial revolution on its own. We need businesses to play their part too. So I'm delighted that more than 2,000 companies have already pledged to take part in the race to zero. And I want to thank President Moon for convening this partnership, giving governments and business leaders another forum to share ideas and insights ahead of COP. Because it's now only 5 months until we gather in Glasgow. 5 months in which we all need to think big, raise our ambitions, and do the hard work that will make the summit a success, so that in the years and decades that follow, the world can look back on COP26 as the moment we chose the right path, not just for our planet, but for all our futures.
President Moon Jae-in, colleagues, it is my great pleasure to join you on the cloud for the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit. Let me begin by expressing appreciation to President Moon and the ROK government for the efforts made in hosting the summit. As we speak, COVID-19 is still raging in the world.
全球范围肆虐，
Many
多国经济
economies have suffered
遭
heavy
受重
blows.
挫，世界经济
Instability and
不稳定，
uncertainty are
不确
rising
定
in the
性
world
增加。
economy. Global
全球
green
绿
and
色和
sustainable
可持续发展
development
面
faces
临严
daunting
峻挑战。
challenges.
面对困难和
Confronted
冲
with
击，
hardships and
国际社会
setbacks,
应当
members of the
守望
international
相助，
community must
同舟共
support
济，
each other in a
努
spirit
力
of
实现
solidarity.
膜发展
We need to
与
advance development
绿色
and
转
green
型
transition at the
并
same
行不悖，
time and in
相互促
mutually
进，推
reinforcing
动
way
旗
and
鼓
strive
升
to
级。
constantly
为
be
此，
on the
我愿
upgrade.
提出
In this
3 点
connection,
建
I
议：
wish to
一是
propose the following.
团结协作，
First, we need to
共同
pool
打
our
赢
strength
全
and
球
win this global fight
抗疫
against
阻击战。
COVID-19
疫
together.
情一日
Unless and until the
不结束，
virus is fully
各
defeated,
国都
no
难以
country would feel
安心发
reassured
展。
in pursuing
面对
development.
病
In
毒这一
face of
共
such a
同的
common
敌
enemy,
人，
no
没
country
有
is
哪个国家
safe
可以
until
独善
every
其
country
身。
is safe.
团结协作
The right
是
way forward in
战胜疫
combating
情的正
COVID-19
道坦
is
途。
for us to pull
我们要
together in this
加
common
强
battle.
抗疫国际合
We
作，
need to intensify
进一步
international
完善
cooperation
全
against the
球
pandemic
卫生治
and
理体
enhance
系，
the
同
global
时
health
加强政
governance
策协
system.
调，
We need to step
快
up
捷
policy
通道、
coordination
绿色通
and
道
use
等
fast
灵活方
tracks,
式，
green lanes, and
保障
other
全
flexible
球
ways
产业
to
链
protect the
供应链
security and
安全
stability
稳
of
定。
global industrial and
二
value
是
chains.
转变思路，推动
Second,
绿
we
色
need to shift our
低碳
approach and pursue
转
green
型。
and low
各
carbon
国疫
transition.
后复苏
The
绝不
old
能
path
重
of
回
development
高污
with
染、
heavy
高
pollution
排
and
放
high
发展的
emissions
老路，
should not be our
要
choice
坚
in
定
seeking a
追求经
post-COVID
济发展与
recovery.
生态环境
Instead,
保护的
we must
动
aim
力，
for win-win results
坚
in
决抑
economic
制粗
development
放型
and environmental
增长冲动，
conservation, resist the impulse
紧
for
抓
an
疫情
expansive
催
mode
生
of
的
growth.
新业态，
We must
加
seize
速
the new
数
development
字化转
opportunities
型，
brought
激发
by the
发
new
展
forms of
新
business,
动能
digital
等
transformation,
新
and the
机遇，
new drivers of growth that
推动
have
实现
emerged in
高质量
COVID
发展。
response to push
三是
forward
照顾
high-quality
发展中
development.
国家特殊困
Third,
难，
we need to accommodate the
国际
special
社会
difficulties of
要
developing
坚持
countries.
共同担
The
有区
international
别的责任
community
原
should
则，
stand by the
高
principle
度
of
重视
common
发展
but
中国家的关
differentiated
切与诉求，
responsibilities.
加大
The concerns
技
and
术、
needs of
资金、
developing
能
countries
力支持，
deserve
帮
closer
助他们
attention
实
and
现
support to them
绿
in
色
technology,
低碳
finance, and
转
capacity
型。
building should
要
be
维
scaled
护
up to help
以
these
世
countries
界
make
贸
the
易组织
transition
为
to
核
green
心
and
的
low
多
carbon
边
growth.
贸易规则
It
体
is
系，
crucial to
警惕
uphold
新的
multilateral
绿
trading
色
system
贸易
with the
壁垒，
World
反
Trade
对单边
Organization
主义
at its
和
core,
贸易
guard
壁垒。
against new green
各位
trade
同事，
barriers, and reject
作为世界上
unilateralism
最大
and
的
trade
发展中国家，
protectionism.
中国要在本
Colleagues,
世纪中叶
as the
实现
largest
现代
developing
化，
country in the
让
world,
中国人民
China
过
has
上幸
opted
福
for
与
low
生
carbon
活的
green
共同
growth
实
as
现
it strives
低
to
碳
realize
绿色
modernization
发
by the
展，
middle of
这
this
在人类历
century
史上
and deliver a
没有
better life
见
for
过，
all its
需要
people.
付出
This is an endeavor that
艰
has
苦
no precedent in
卓绝的
human
努力
history
才能实
and
现。
can only become a
中国国
reality
家
with
主席习近
painstaking
平
efforts.
宣布，
President Xi
中国力
Jinping
争
has announced that China will strive to peak
2030
carbon dioxide
前
emissions before
实现
2030
碳达峰
and achieve
，2060
carbon
年前
neutrality
实现
before
碳中和。
2060.
中国将
We will establish and
建立
improve
健
an
全
economic
绿
system
色
of
低
green,
碳循
low
环发展
carbon
经
and
济体系，
circular
促
development
进
and advance
经济社会
all-round
发展
green
全面
transition in economic and
绿色
social
转型，
development.
以降碳为
We will take
重
lower
点，
carbon emissions as a
战略方向，
strategic
推动
priority
减污
and seek
降碳
greater
协
synergy
同增效。
between
中
carbon
国还将
pollution and
在今
cutting
年10
carbon
月主办
emissions.
生物
This
多样性
October,
公约
China
第
will host the
15次缔约
15th
方大
meeting
会
of the
愿
Conference
同
of
国际社会
Parties
一道，
to the
推
Convention
动
on
全
Biological
球
Diversity.
生物多样
We are
性
ready
治
to work with
迈上
all other
新
members
台
of the
阶，
global community
各
to
位同
take
事，
global biodiversity
绿色
governance to a new
决定
level.
了未来
Colleagues,
发展的
whether we
成
go
色。
green or not
中
today
方
could make or
愿
break
同
our
各方一道，
development in the
携
future.
手推动
China stands ready
绿
to
色复
work
苏，
with
共
all
创
sides to
人类
boost a green
更加
recovery
美
and
好的
create a
未来。
better future for
谢谢大
all
家。
humanity. Thank you.
为了我们的 绿色未来，现在行动。
Excellencies, friends, I thank President Moon Jae-in and the government of the Republic of Korea for hosting this year's P4G summit. The title of this initiative expresses exactly what the world needs now: global partnership. Partnership to beat COVID-19 and build a better recovery. Partnership to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And partnership to address climate change. We have taken some important steps lately. Socio-economic response and recovery plans, supported by the UN Development System worldwide, have helped alleviate some of the worst impacts of the pandemic for the poorest and most marginalized. And some 73% of greenhouse gas emissions are now covered by commitments to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. But there is still much to do to close the emissions gap so we can achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. That is why I'm urging all main emitters to present new nationally determined contributions, commit to net zero emissions by 2050, and most importantly, to put in place policies and programs that will get us there. Tackling climate change head-on will help protect the most vulnerable people from the next crisis while sustaining a job-rich recovery from the pandemic. The first priority is no new coal plants and the phase-out of coal use by 2030 in OECD countries and 2040 in the rest of the world. On this, I commend the government of the Republic of Korea for announcing it will stop all international coal finance. I encourage all remaining governments and private sector entities to do the same. Excellencies, dear friends, as well as the emissions gap, I am deeply concerned about the finance and adaptation gaps. Developed countries have yet to deliver on the $100 billion per annum commitment. Public finance is not flowing where it's now most needed to support vulnerable communities that are already suffering the consequences of climate disruption. 1 person in 3 is still not adequately covered by early warning systems. And women and girls, who make up 80% of those displaced by the climate emergency, are all too often excluded from the decision to address the climate crisis. We urgently need a breakthrough on adaptation and resilience. I'm asking all donor countries to significantly enhance their financial commitments. That includes allocating 50% of climate finance to adaptation and providing a higher level of grants. The G7 summit, where the Republic of Korea is invited, needs to deliver on all these objectives. It is not a global partnership if some are left struggling to survive. This is true for COVID and the distribution of vaccines, and it is true for the climate emergency. Excellencies, dear friends, this summit's focus is on an inclusive green recovery. That means financing the infrastructure of tomorrow, now. It means supporting developing countries in their transition to sustainable energy and a circular economy, while helping them to diversify their economies and ensure a just transition. And it means putting an equal emphasis on adaptation. In short, we need a global partnership for green, inclusive, sustainable development. In this quest, the Republic of Korea is leading partner. I commend the government for its 2050 net zero pledge and the Korean Green New Deal. And I encourage it to follow through with a coal phase-out plan and enhanced NDCs in line with its long-term goal, and increase international support for adaptation, renewable energy, and SDG investments. If all governments embrace the same goals, we will have an opportunity for a real partnership that will equip us to rise to the biggest challenge of our lives. Let us work together for a sustainable and equitable future for all people on a healthy planet. Thank you.
Yang Mulia Presiden Moon Jae-in dan para pemimpin yang hadir pada KTT penting ini. Pertama-tama, saya mengucapkan terima kasih dan selamat kepada Republik Korea atas penyelenggaraan konferensi tingkat tinggi P4G Partnering for Green Growth and Global Goals 2030 di tengah situasi yang sangat menantang. Ancaman perubahan iklim dan pandemi COVID-19 mengingatkan kita untuk lebih serius dalam mengembangkan pembangunan yang berkelanjutan, inklusif, dan berketahanan. Inisiatif P4G, Partnering for Green Growth and Global Goals 2030 tidak bisa dilakukan dengan business as usual. Kita harus melakukan dengan cara-cara yang luar biasa. Kemitraan antar pemangku kepentingan adalah kunci untuk memastikan aktivitas perekonomian, produksi, dan konsumsi dilakukan secara berkelanjutan. Untuk itu, kita perlu melakukan langkah-langkah fundamental untuk memastikan tercapainya pembangunan hijau di tataran global. Pertama, kita harus mewujudkan enabling environment yang mendorong sinergi antara investasi dan penciptaan lapangan kerja dengan pembangunan hijau. Indonesia telah menerapkan perencanaan pembangunan rendah karbon yang menjadi bagian tak terpisahkan dari rencana pembangunan jangka menengah nasional. Indonesia juga telah meluncurkan Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja sebagai wujud komitmen Indonesia untuk memastikan agar kemajuan ekonomi dan sosial masyarakat tidak merugikan lingkungan. Yang kedua, mendorong inovasi dalam memobilisasi sumber daya pendukung bagi implementasi pertumbuhan hijau. Ketersediaan dukungan pendanaan dan transfer teknologi merupakan kunci sukses bagi pembangunan hijau, bagi netralitas karbon. Oleh karena itu, Indonesia terbuka bagi investasi dan transfer teknologi. Indonesia tengah mengembangkan kawasan industri hijau terbesar di dunia, di Kalimantan Utara, yang mempunyai potensi besar dalam pengembangan energi terbarukan. Indonesia juga memiliki visi untuk membangun pasar karbon dan akan menjadi pemilik stok karbon terbesar di dunia. Ketiga, kita perlu memperkuat kerjasama konkret yang bisa segera efektif dilaksanakan dan bisa berkelanjutan. Kita harus menghindari proteksionisme yang berkedok isu lingkungan. Parameter pro lingkungan harus jelas serta dijalankan secara jujur dan transparan. Kerjasama dan upaya bersama untuk menyelesaikan masalah bersama menjadi syarat fundamental bagi kesuksesan ekonomi hijau. Apalagi di saat dunia dalam masa pemulihan pandemi sekarang ini. Dan saya tegaskan bahwa Indonesia berkomitmen tinggi untuk bersama-sama dunia mewujudkan kehidupan yang lebih berkelanjutan, inklusif, dan berketahanan. Terima kasih.
Уважаемые участники саммита, дамы и господа, прежде всего хочу выразить признательность президенту Мун Чжэ Ыну за приглашение принять участие в этом важном мероприятии. Мы приветствуем и высоко ценим инициативы и усилия наших корейских партнеров в решении острых проблем устойчивого развития и продвижения зеленой повестки на глобальном уровне. Пользуясь случаем, искренне поздравляю всех вас и особенно господина Пан Ги Муна с десятилетием Глобального института зеленого роста. Уважаемые участники, пандемия показала, насколько взаимосвязаны здоровье человека и состояние экологии, а также экономический и социальный прогресс. Мы уже не можем игнорировать сигналы, которые нам посылает сама природа. К сожалению, климатические изменения нарастают. У нас в Центральной Азии среднегодовая температура за последние 30 лет выросла примерно на 1 градус. Глубокое беспокойство вызывает сокращение объемов стока главных рек и биоразнообразия в нашем регионе. Усугубляется проблема парниковых газов и масштабного загрязнения атмосферы. Уже никто не сомневается, что действия стран для достижения целей зеленого развития должны быть более активными и более эффективными. Иного выхода у нас нет. В Узбекистане мы начали эту важную работу. Реализуем комплексную стратегию перехода на зеленую экономику, а также программу развития возобновляемой и водородной энергетики. В рамках Парижского соглашения мы обязались сократить выбросы парниковых газов на 10% к 2030 году. Мы первыми в регионе присоединились к Глобальному институту зеленого роста и намерены открыть его офис в Узбекистане. Отвечая на ваш вопрос, хотел бы обозначить ключевые для нас направления взаимодействия в сфере зеленого восстановления. Первое – это преодоление глобальных последствий катастрофы Аральского моря за счет активного внедрения зеленых технологий. По этому вопросу намерены активно сотрудничать с нашими партнерами, в том числе в рамках специально созданного трастового фонда ООН и на площадке P4G. Признателен за поддержку нашей инициативы, принятой на днях специальной резолюции ООН об объявлении Приорале зоной экологических инноваций и технологий. Второе. Стремление к достижению углеродной нейтральности за счет развития зеленой энергетики. мы начали реализацию крупных проектов по строительству солнечных и ветровых электростанций. Намерено в ближайшие 10 лет более чем в 3 раза увеличить долю возобновляемых источников. Кроме того, тесно сотрудничаем с соседними государствами в освоении большого гидроэнергетического потенциала нашего региона. Готовы провести в следующем году в Узбекистане международную конференцию «Зеленая энергетика для развивающихся стран». Третье. Предлагаем запустить специальную программу привлечения молодежи, формирования зеленой экономики. Это позволит в будущем сформировать культуру зеленого потребления. Четвертое. Выступаем за налаживание тесного делового сотрудничества, поддержки растущего доверия финансового сектора и инвесторов к зеленым технологиям. В этих целях Узбекистан готов присоединиться к партнерству P4G и стать его полноправным участником. В заключение хочу выразить уверенность, что итоги сегодняшнего саммита послужат расширению нашего практического взаимодействия в рамках этой важной международной экологической платформы. Желаю всем успехов. Благодарю за внимание.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السيد الرئيس، السيدات الفضليات، السادة الأفاضل، إن التصدي لتغيير المناخ ومخلفاته السلبية يقتضي من الجميع بذل جهود معتبرة، ويجدر التأكيد أن الدول الإفريقية منها الجزائر هي التي تعاني أكثر من غيرها من هذه الظاهرة. قطعت الجزائر أشواطا معتبرة للمشاركة وفقا ما تتيحه إمكانياتها في الجهد العالمي للحد من ارتفاع درجات الحرارة، وذلك من خلال مساهمتها المعتزمة المحددة وطنيا بالالتزام بخفض انبعاثات غازاتها الدفيئة بنسبة 7%، بالاعتماد على قدراتها الوطنية، وب22% إذا حصلت على دعم دولي كافي خلال الفترة من 2020 إلى 2030. ويرتكز هذا الالتزام أساساً على الوصول إلى إنتاج ما يقارب 15,000 ميجاوات من الطاقة المتجددة بحلول 2035. وكانت بلادي سباقة بإطلاق مشروع السد الأخضر للحد من ظاهرة التصحر منذ 5 عقود بطول 1500 كيلومتر. وقصد إحياء هذه النظرة تم طلب دعم صندوق المناخ الأخضر لتوسيع السد وإعادة تأهيله. سيد الرئيس، أختتم كلمتي بالتأكيد على ضرورة تقيد الدول المتقدمة بالتزاماتها بموجب اتفاق باريس بمنح ما لا يقل عن 100 مليار دولار سنويا لدعم جهود الدول النامية لبلوغ الأهداف المسطرة في هذا الاتفاق، إلى جانب المساعدة على بلوغ الحياد الكربوني المرجو في منتصف هذا القرن. ونتقاسم في هذا الشأن المخاوف حول إعادة تخصيص الموارد المائية المخصصة لدعم نشاطاتها الحد من تغير المناخ لدعم تدابير التي تهدف إلى التصدي لجائحة كورونا. أشكركم على حسن الإصغاء والسلام عليكم.
Thank you for inviting me to address the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit. My thanks to the government of the Republic of Korea for convening this hugely important discussion. COVID-19 recovery spending is a great chance to accelerate action on the Paris Agreement, on the Sustainable Development Goals, and on other critical agendas. The most effective stimulus policies are those that creates recovery through decarbonization, through backing nature and tackling pollution. Such policies can also address growing inequalities, improving health, increasing food security, and creating green jobs, and so much more. Now, the Republic of Korea is showing real commitment to such a green recovery. In 2020 alone, the Republic of Korea allocated $53.6 billion to green investments, largely through the Green New Deal. This effort, alongside the 2050 carbon neutrality pledge, provides an important example to the rest of the world. At the global level, green spending is not sufficient to address the planetary crisis of climate change, of nature loss, and pollution. In 2020, only 18% of recovery spending and 2.5% of total spending in the 50 major economies had positive green characteristics. We need to see more investments flowing to clean and efficient energy, to clean transport, to green buildings, to natural capital, to clean R&D. Spending and stimulus efforts need to be followed by reforms that address key market failures in pricing externalities. This means accounting for the value of nature and the damage our economic activities cause to it in all economic decisions. We must also all show solidarity. As with COVID-19, a sustainable recovery is not possible unless everyone recovers. We need to support developing nations on everything from climate resilience to supply chain circularity. In particular, developing nations may see particularly high benefits from natural capital investments. Despite the slow start, pandemic recovery spending remains a major opportunity to kickstart the accelerated action we need to create a peaceful and prosperous world that lives in harmony with nature. The Republic of Korea has shown the way. We all need to follow. Thank you.
The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has significantly set back the Caribbean's economic reform agenda and is delaying our attainment of Agenda 2030 development targets. Just before the pandemic, Jamaica was preparing to reap the benefits of its significant macroeconomic reform program. The benefits were instead eroded, and circumstances compounded by significant rain-induced infrastructure damage. The result? Jamaica recorded its worst economic decline in 40 years. This double blow, common in the experience of Caribbean small island developing states, not only contributed to increased debt, but also came on the back of an extended period of climate-induced shocks, exacerbating the vulnerabilities of our small, open economies. In addition to the public health response, Jamaica's COVID-19 recovery has been geared at emerging economically and socially stronger through policy initiatives that boost competitiveness, increase productivity, enhance resilience, and improve social safety. Among other steps, we introduced a stimulus package, including productivity incentives for micro, small, and medium enterprises, and an extensive social protection program. The recovery program also targets investments in green infrastructure, carbon neutral and nature-based solutions, renewables, digitization, and expanded use of technology, especially to support agriculture and supply chain management. In the medium to longer term, it is directly aligned to Jamaica's 2020 enhanced nationally determined contribution and will decouple economic growth from emissions growth. Like other developing countries, the extent of Jamaica's greening has been limited by the inadequacy of the means of implementation, including financial resources and technology. For us, recovery includes resilience and is therefore integrally linked to the climate agenda and the SDGs. In this regard, Jamaica calls on the international community to accelerate climate action and bridge SDG implementation gaps. We also call on the international community to ensure that there is equitable global access to COVID-19 vaccines, that financial resources for climate action be scaled up and access simplified, that new categories are established for access to concessional and non-concessional development finance based on vulnerability measures rather than per capita income, that more resources are dedicated to adaptation in recognition of the vulnerability of low emitters, that access to appropriate technology, especially for early warning systems, research and development, digitization, and modernization be assured. Today, we have a unique opportunity to generate an inclusive, resilient, and green recovery that ensures a broad and lasting rise in prosperity, especially for the poorest, most marginalized, highly indebted, and vulnerable. It is an opportunity we cannot afford to miss.
Эрхэм хүнд төлөөлөгчид хатагтай ноёдоо дэлхийн улс орн бүр цар тахалтай тэмцэж буй энэ хүнд үед энэхүү чухал ач холбогдолтой хурлыг захимаар зохион байгуулж буй бүгд найрамдах Солонгос улсын засгийн газарт талархал илэрхийлье. Сүүлийн жилүүдэд бид уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтөд тэмцэх байгалийн доройтлыг бууруулах, их дэлхийг хамгаалах талаар маш олон удаа хэлцэж олон үүрэг амлалтыг хүлээсэн. Харамсалтай тэдгээрийн хэрэгжилт бодит үр дүн тун чамлалтай байна. Монгол улс бол уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтөд нэн эмзэг өртөмтгийн орнуудын нэг билээ. Сүүлийн 20 гаруй жилд цаг агарын аюулт үзэгдлийн давтамж 2 дахин ихсэж тэдгээрээс үүдсэн эдийн засгийн хохирол бас нэмэгдсээр байна. Уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтөөс үүдэн гарах хор хохирол, байгалийн аюулт үзэгдэл, гамшигаас сэргийлэхийн тулд бид дэлхийн дулаарлыг 1.5 хэмд хязгаарлах ёстой маа. Энэ их дэлхийг хамгаалах хамгийн энгийн хэрэгжүүлэх болох арга хэмжээ юм. Парисын хэлэлцээрийн дагуу улс орн бүр хүлэмжийн ялгарлыг бууруулах үндэсний зорилтоо тодорхойлон хэрэгжүүлэх үүрэг хүлээсэн байдаг. Монгол улсын хувьд үндэсний хүлэмжийн ялгарлыг 2030 он гэхэд $20.2 бууруулахаар амлалтаа ахиулсан. Хүндэт төлөөлөгчдөө дэлхийд даяар байгаль дээлтэй ногоон технологийн шилжилтийг төр хувийн хвшлийн хамтын ажиллагаагаар улам эрчимжүүлэх шаардлагатай байгаамаа. Тийм ч учраас миний бие Монгол улсын ерөнхийлөгчөөр сонгогдсныхаа дараахан Оросын холбооны улсын Владивосток хотод дорны эдийн засгийн чуулган дээр ногоон технологийн нэг болох сэргээгт эрдэм хүчний зүүн хойд Азийн эрчим хүчний супер сүлжээ байгуулах санаачлалыг бодит ажил хэрэг болох тодорхой саналыг дэвшүүлсэн. Жилийн 270 хоногт нартай цэлмэгээд Монголын говь нутагт нь нарны эрчим хүчний нөөцөөр дэлхийд Сахарын цэлийн дараа 2 дугаарт ордог. Тэгэхээр энэ ариун нөөцөө ашиглан цахилгаан эрчим хүч үйлдвэрлэж, улирлын болон цагийн бүсийн зөрүүнээс үүдэн Өмнөд Солонгос зэрэг улсуудын оргил цагийн ачааллын хөнгөвчлөх түүнээс гадна хураагуурын үүрэг гүйцэтгэх бүрэн боломжтой юм аа. Байгаль орчноо хамгаалах болон эдийн засгийн оновчтой шийдэл нь энэхүү сэргээгт эрчим хүчний сүлжээ юм аа. Цаг хугацаа, уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлт та биднийг хүлээхгүй. Улс орн бүр цар тахлыг хохирол багтаа даван туулахын зэрэгцээ цар тахлын дараах эдийн засгийн сэргэлтийг байгаль орчинд хал багтаа ногоон хэв загвар шилжүүлэх олон улсын хамтын нийгэмдгийн өмнө хүлээсэн үүргээ шийдэмгий, дөрвтэй бодит ажлуудаар эхэлж үр дүнд хүрэхийг уриалъя. Анхаарал тавьсанд баярлалаа.
2021 is a make or break year to tackle the climate emergency. Success at COP26 in November is critical to keep the negotiation process moving forward. And that will require nations not just to follow through on past due commitments, but at the same time raise their collective ambition. It's long past time to wrap up outstanding negotiations and implement the Paris Agreement. Unleashing its full potential will not only address climate change, but help the world build forward from COVID-19. Parties must fulfill their pre-2020 climate commitments, especially with respect to submission of stronger NDCs, and deliver on the pledge by developed nations to mobilize $100 billion annually to developing nations. The obligation to support the efforts of developing countries is paramount and cannot be ignored. From a broader perspective, civil society as a whole must demand of their governments that climate change become a central element of their financial policies and practices. Governments must move away from their long-standing approach to progress, an approach that historically overlooked or disregarded the climate consequences of their investments. But this is also true of private business and investors as well. We must see integration of climate change considerations in fiscal and financial decisions throughout society. Decisions that are consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. We must also raise ambition in mitigation and adaptation. Never has global expectation and political commitment been so far apart. It's time to close that gap. To that end, the Secretary General has called for 50% of the total share of climate finance provided by all developed countries and multilateral development banks to be allocated to adaptation and resilience. The UN urges all donors and multilateral development banks to commit to this goal by COP26 and deliver on it at least by 2024. And finally, we must increase our efforts to bring state and non-state voices together to continue building climate ambition. All have a crucial role to play in the transformation that the world needs. Despite the ticking of the climate clock, I remain optimistic that our climate goals and successful negotiations at COP26 are attainable. These will help not only get us back on track, but take advantage of this truly incredible opportunity the present provides to make the transition towards a cleaner, greener, more sustainable, and prosperous planet for all people.
गणतन्त्र कोरियाका महामहिम राष्ट्रपतिज्यू, महामहिमज्यूहरू, भद्र महिला तथा सज्जनवृन्द, यस महत्त्वपूर्ण शिखर सम्मेलनको आयोजना गर्नुभएकोमा गणतन्त्र कोरियाका महामहिम राष्ट्रपतिज्यूप्रति म हार्दिक धन्यवाद प्रकट गर्दछु। जलवायु परिवर्तनका कारण अहिले मानव सभ्यता इतिहासकै सबैभन्दा कठिन मोडमा पुगेको बेला मानव जातिलाई कोभिड-19 को महामारीले थप सङ्कटमा पारेको छ। यस प्रतिकूल परिस्थितिमा पेरिस सम्झौताको सफल कार्यान्वयन र दिगो विकासका लक्ष्यहरू प्राप्त गर्न महत्त्वाकांक्षी राष्ट्रिय योगदानसहितको प्रतिबद्धता आजको टटकारो आवश्यकता हो। नेपालले सन् 2050 सम्ममा कार्बन तटस्थ राष्ट्र बन्ने दीर्घकालीन लक्ष्यका साथ परिमार्जित राष्ट्रिय योगदानका लागि प्रतिबद्धता व्यक्त गरिसकेको छ। जलवायु परिवर्तनको मुद्दालाई समग्रतामा सम्बोधन गर्न प्रकृतिमा आधारित हरित अर्थतन्त्र र बजार व्यवस्था आवश्यक छ। सबै मुलुकहरूले र विशेषतः अधिक मात्रामा हरित गृह ग्यास उत्सर्जनकर्ताहरूले त्यसको न्यूनीकरण, अनुकूलन, वित्त तथा प्रविधि हस्तान्तरणका लागि थप आर्थिक र प्राविधिक स्रोतको व्यवस्था गर्नु पर्दछ। अति कम विकसित राष्ट्रका नागरिकको आधुनिक प्रविधिमाथिको पहुँच वृद्धि गर्दै उनीहरूको जलवायु अनुकूलन क्षमता बढाउने गरी कार्य गर्नुपर्दछ। यसै वर्ष बेलायतको ग्लासगोमा सम्पन्न हुने COP26 को पूर्व सन्ध्यामा आयोजित यो सम्मेलनले जलवायु वित्त सिर्जना गर्न र जलवायु न्यायको क्षेत्रमा काम गर्न थप योगदान दिनेमा म पूर्ण विश्वस्त छु। महामहिमज्यूहरू, नेपाल एक पर्वतीय मुलुक भएकाले यो जहिले पनि जलवायु परिवर्तनको उच्च जोखिममा रहिआएको छ। पर्यावरण विनाशका कारण युवा, कृषक समुदाय तथा विपन्न वर्ग र विशेष गरी वृद्ध-वृद्धा, महिला तथा बालबालिकाले विभिन्न प्रतिकूलताहरू झेलिरहेका छन्। जलवायु नीति तथा कार्यहरूमा हामीले सबैको सहकार्यसहित महिलाको नेतृत्वदायी भूमिका सुनिश्चित गर्नै पर्दछ। भावी पुस्तासहित सरोकारवाला सबैलाई लक्षित गरी जलवायु अनुकूलनका कार्यक्रम सञ्चालन गर्नुपर्ने खाँचो रहेको छ। अति कम विकसित मुलुक, भूपरिवेष्टित विकासशील देश टापु राष्ट्र र हिमाली क्षेत्रका लागि सहज वातावरण बनाउन प्रत्यक्ष रूपमा वित्त र प्रविधिमा पहुँच सुनिश्चित गर्नुपर्दछ। विश्वलाई सङ्कट परेको बेला नेपालले जहिले पनि अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय समुदायसँग हातेमालो गर्दै आएको छ। जलवायु परिवर्तन र कोभिड-19 को महामारीको यो सङ्कटको घडीमा सबै अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय समुदायसँग मिलेर काम गर्ने प्रतिबद्धता व्यक्त गर्दै म यो सम्मेलनको पूर्ण सफलताको शुभकामना व्यक्त गर्दछु। धन्यवाद।
Excellency Moon Jae-in, President of the Republic of Korea, distinguished delegates. The P4G Summit is a reminder that the climate crisis has lost none of its urgency during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you to President Moon for convening this meeting at such a critical juncture as we prepare for COP26 later this year. To achieve a recovery from the pandemic that is both green and inclusive, we have to keep a few points in mind. First, economic growth is fueled by energy, quite literally. In developing economies, we need to both produce and consume much more energy than we currently do in order to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. This means incentivizing renewable energy and reducing subsidies for fossil fuels. In Rwanda, for example, we are beginning the transition to electric vehicles as part of our journey toward carbon neutrality. Second, it is imperative to protect biodiversity and sustainably manage our land, water, and forest resources. Good stewardship of our natural environment generates long-term economic returns. But biodiversity and conservation are important for another reason as well: to reduce the growing risk of infectious pathogens jumping from animals to humans, leading to devastating pandemics. Finally, let's remember to emphasize that green growth will be an important source of high-quality employment opportunities for our young people going forward. Green jobs are high-tech jobs firmly rooted in the knowledge economy of the future. Investment in green technologies and industries in every corner of the world is therefore a key strategy for ensuring that recovery from this pandemic is more inclusive. I wish you fruitful deliberations at the summit, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Globally, we cannot begin the green recovery without first overcoming the COVID pandemic. So governments should provide equal and free access to vaccines, including supporting waiving vaccine patents, as C40 mayors have called for. For those countries where the worst of the health crisis is receding, a government signals its level of commitment to climate action by how it invests in the recovery. That means all stimulus must be green stimulus. If recovery packages are designed to return to business as usual, then we've probably missed our last chance. Government's first priority will obviously be to create and protect jobs. And C40 research shows that a fast global programme of green stimulus will create more jobs than going back to business as usual, 18 million jobs in C40 cities alone, whilst also protecting health and enabling us to get on track to halving global emissions by 2030. The biggest opportunities for both cutting emissions and creating jobs in cities is in decarbonising the building sector. We can see a great example of this in Seoul, creating 26,000 new jobs by 2022 by making old buildings energy efficient and ensuring all transport fleets are electric. And investing in emissions-free mobility is the second biggest urban opportunity for jobs and climate. Medellin in Colombia has worked with its central government to jointly fund a new fully electric metro line that will result in the creation of thousands of green jobs and the elimination of 5 million tonnes of CO2 per year. We need to see governments everywhere investing in mass transit. This is also a moment where governments need to be entrepreneurial, investing and shaping markets to drive the shift to a fairer, low-carbon economy. At C40, we'd like to see entrepreneurial governments introducing annual carbon budgets so that every dollar spent has to be accounted for in the carbon it generates or saves, something that's already being pioneered in one of our cities, Oslo. And alongside investing in the stuff we need, all financing and public subsidies for fossil fuels must end now. I know that the Republic of Korea recently announced it is ending all new financing for overseas coal projects, a crucial step. And finally, and perhaps the most important act of global collaboration, is that wealthy countries must also ensure that overseas development aid and financing supports global south countries on both mitigation and adaptation to the $100 billion a year that has been promised. With fast, large-scale action, we can turn the pandemic and climate crises into a strong green recovery, creating a fairer, healthier future for all our citizens.
Mesdames, Messieurs, je félicite le président Moon Jae-in pour l'organisation de ce deuxième sommet virtuel du P4G, remobilisant la communauté internationale autour des objectifs mondiaux de croissance verte. Après le retour remarquable des États-Unis d'Amérique dans l'accord de Paris sur le climat, ce sommet, en pleine pandémie Covid-19, nous donne l'occasion de maintenir l'élan pour une croissance verte et durable fondée sur la responsabilité commune mais différenciée. Le Sénégal continue de travailler dans ce sens grâce à une politique soutenue de mix énergétique et de partenariat avec le secteur privé. Premièrement, nous développons les énergies renouvelables, y compris par l'installation de centrales solaires, éoliennes dans les zones non encore connectées au réseau national de distribution d'électricité. Deuxièmement, nous poursuivons une politique de transition énergétique par la stratégie Gas to Power pour adapter nos centrales électriques et notre réseau de distribution aux perspectives d'exploitation prochaine de nos ressources gazières. Troisièmement, le Sénégal associe depuis plusieurs années le secteur privé national et étranger à la production énergétique en mode Independent Power Producer, ce qui a permis d'améliorer considérablement la fourniture de l'électricité. Grâce à tous ces efforts, les énergies propres occupent aujourd'hui plus d'un tiers des capacités électriques du Sénégal. Il faut aussi rappeler que l'Afrique, qui pollue le moins, subit le plus les effets des changements climatiques. Pour que le continent trouve sa place dans une croissance mondiale verte, durable et inclusive, il est important que les pays partenaires respectent l'engagement convenu de 100 milliards de dollars par an en soutien aux efforts de lutte des pays en développement contre le changement climatique. Cet engagement n'est pas d'ordre moral, mais une part de responsabilité à assumer en contrepartie des efforts que mènent nos pays pour aider à sauver la planète en évitant les mêmes schémas de production pollueurs que les pays industrialisés ont empruntés. Enfin, je renouvelle mon appel à l'allègement conséquent du fardeau de la dette africaine et à la réallocation solidaire des droits de tirage spéciaux en appui à nos politiques de résilience et de relance post-Covid. Ensemble, travaillons pour une nouvelle gouvernance économique et financière mondiale qui remet l'homme l'humanité au cœur des objectifs du développement durable. Je vous remercie.
If we could just carry off the remnants we have left behind, in the space that remains, clear and sparkling things could bloom once again. All that we treasured in our daily lives, if we want to leave them for our children, time is running out. For the Earth's sake, and for our own, let's start now.
Thank you, President Moon, for convening the P4G Seoul Summit. While we each continue to overcome the twin impacts of COVID-19 on public health and economy, we must not lose sight of the urgent challenge of climate change. We must build back better from this crisis in a more sustainable and inclusive manner. First, governments must show leadership by coming forward with ambitious climate targets and long-term implementation strategies. We will send a powerful message that we are collectively committed in our fight against climate change. We must meet our commitments under the Paris Agreement on both mitigation and adaptation. This will send a strong signal to the private sector, investors, and financiers. Singapore submitted our enhanced 2030 climate pledge and long-term strategy to the UNFCCC in March 2020. We are taking bold steps to achieve our net zero emissions aspirations through the Singapore Green Plan 2030, a whole-of-nation roadmap guiding our sustainable development efforts. Second, we must accelerate decarbonization efforts by collaborating and investing in low-carbon solutions. Singapore is making significant investments in urban solutions and sustainability, a pillar of our national research plan that includes alternative clean energy, water resilience, and climate science. We're collaborating with international partners such as the Korea Institute of Energy Technology, Evaluation and Planning in smart grids and energy technologies, and are tapping on the low carbon potential of clean electricity imports from the region. Green finance is a key enabler, and we are growing the pool of financing through initiatives such as the $2 billion Green Investments Program and increasing sustainable investments, loans, and bonds to facilitate Asia's transition. Third, we need to redesign our cities for greater resilience with smaller carbon footprints. Our Green Towns program aims to reduce energy consumption in public housing estates by 15% by 2030. We have installed one of the world's largest solar farms on our reservoir and will quadruple our solar energy deployment by 2025. We've started work on our first integrated water and solid waste treatment facility called Tuas Nexus, which will increase the production of biogas and save more than 200,000 tons of CO2 emissions annually. We are also transforming Singapore into a city in nature by enhancing and extending our greenery island-wide, including by planting an additional 1 million trees by 2030. International cooperation is key to fostering an inclusive green recovery from COVID-19. Singapore remains committed to supporting fellow developing countries by sharing experiences and technical assistance under the Singapore Cooperation Programme and Climate Action Package. We stand ready to work with all countries to fulfill the Paris goals and achieve the SDGs in the decade of action. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, it is a great pleasure for me to join you here today and to speak to you on behalf of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. First, I would like to thank the government of the Republic of Korea for their leadership in convening this important meeting. I have a single message for you today. Land restoration and sustainable land management can contribute to the green recovery from COVID-19, delivering multiple benefits to humanity. Indeed, land-based economic recovery will benefit people and nature, promoting greater balance between development and environment. Restoring degraded land delivers economic resilience, creates jobs, and raises economic levels. It also increases food and water security. It helps to lock away atmospheric carbon, slowing climate change. Land restoration brings back biodiversity. The people of the Republic of Korea know this too well. You have been so successful in restoring your once naked landscapes. The story of a country that transforms its economy while also protecting its environment. I note with a cautious optimism a growing momentum on land management, especially on land restoration. Starting with SDG 15, Life on Land, it will be central to all collective and individual efforts as we embark into the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Secondly, people seem to understand the centrality of land to address several global challenges. When we degrade land, we erode its ability to produce the food we eat, to generate the quality water we drink, the fiber we need to clothe, the fodder for our animals, and simply the air we breathe. This brings me to my third point. There is a restoration economy, not only for the rural and the poor. Even the poorer you are, the more you entirely depend on your piece of land for your survival. A green recovery, land-powered, will create resilient economies. Land-based restoration is particularly helpful for women and for youth, who tend to suffer the most in time of crisis. As the world begins to build forward better, the devastated economies and destabilized societies in the aftermath of the pandemic, land restoration and sustainable land management are among the best long-term responses to the pandemic. With trillions of dollars being put into economic recovery and restoration commitments covering almost 1 billion hectares already in place as the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration gets away, we have a real chance to build back better with healthy land. And in that ambition, now that you are thinking of post-COVID recovery efforts and how to make it all fit into your long-term planning, I have a simple ask. Bring land restoration to the center of your COVID recovery actions. Thank you very much.
His Excellency, Mr. Moon Jae-in, President of the Republic of Korea, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me first thank His Excellency, Mr. Moon Jae-in, and the government of the Republic of Korea for inviting me to deliver this message on an inclusive green recovery from COVID-19. The global pandemic has taught us multiple lessons, but I would like to draw your attention to one in particular, that safeguarding nature is critical for protecting our human health and well-being. While the economic impacts of COVID-19 have been devastating, prolonged inaction on climate change and the continued degradation of ecosystems will have even greater impacts on economies and people around the world as biodiversity loss and destruction of ecosystems contribute to the risks of zoonotic diseases. Over half of the world's total GDP is directly or indirectly dependent on nature and its services. And if we consider that close to 50% of medical drugs are developed from natural products, with about 50,000 to 70,000 plant species harvested for medicine, the links between nature and our health become even more evident. To better address the interconnected challenges among biodiversity, climate, and human health, we must transform our global economic systems. COVID-19 has provided an opportunity to change the course and rethink both conservation and the management of our global economy. In the past weeks, we have also seen unprecedented ambition from governments doubling efforts to meet their climate targets in line with the Paris Agreement. We need to hold this ambition high and make this year a momentous milestone for climate and biodiversity. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework that will be adopted under the Convention on Biological Diversity can be key to a green recovery as a universal instrument to protect, restore, and sustainably use biodiversity and fight climate change while providing jobs growth, and economic prosperity. I would like to finish by recognizing the leadership from the Republic of Korea for their work on biodiversity conservation and ecosystem restoration as an active partner of the Convention through the Forest Ecosystems Restoration Initiative, only one example of their strong commitment. Let us all ensure that ambitions from this summit have an echo around the globe. Our commitment will help build a more equitable and resilient future for generations to come. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It's an honor to contribute to the very worthwhile efforts of the P4G initiative. As we are all aware, the aviation sector is a pillar of global transport at the very center of our socio-economic development. COVID-19 has presented profound challenges to the international community. And among its many impacts, international aviation has been especially hard hit. This shutdown has provided us, however, with an important opportunity to build back better in terms of in-sector aviation sustainability, with many airlines re-evaluating traditional technologies and business approaches, and taking older, more emissions-intensive aircraft permanently out of service. Solidarity in how we optimize these evolutions is essential, and I'm encouraged that governments have been continuing to collaborate with industry and civil society throughout the pandemic on the current and comprehensive ICAO Environment Work Program. MENA are also maintaining ICAO state action plans to reduce national in-sector CO2 reductions, and would call upon them to update this as a matter of urgency. Governments can also do more by leveraging the pandemic bailouts they are providing to their national airlines, by assuring that these funds come with clear sustainability strands attached. ICAO has been conducting seminars to help drive awareness and momentum on in-sector CO2 reductions, and I have been inspired by the high degree of innovation now being focused on the challenge of aviation sustainability. This speaks to the fact that we can and must determine a sustainable path for air transport without sacrificing our shared connections to each other and our world. Success will require us to efficiently and holistically assess the technology, financing, infrastructure, policy, and other important perspectives this work engages. States representing 68% of the global economy and 61% of its emissions have already committed to net zero national targets by 2050. And as countries now explore a new long-term aspirational goal for international flight emissions, I would invite them to take a bold action through ICAO to meet our shared climate objectives, to contribute to the realization of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a world without shipping is unimaginable. Shipping drives global trade and connects nations and regions. Through the COVID-19 pandemic, seafarers and shipping have continued to deliver goods to the world, including vital medical supplies. The post-COVID economic recovery rely on trade by sea. The International Maritime Organization, IMO, set the universal standards for the safety, environmental performance, and efficiency of international shipping. One of the key objectives is to ensure a sustainable blue economy. IMO works with the governments and the maritime industry to promote ocean governance by enhancing the cooperation of all maritime stakeholders, facilitate seaborne trade across the supply chain through digitalization, and not least to combat climate change through the decarbonization of shipping, paying particular attention to research and development and alternative future fuels. At the same time, IMO also ensures that no one is left behind by supporting developing countries in their efforts for green and inclusive economic growth. We will expand our existing partnerships between stakeholders and build new ones among public and private sectors in the Maritime Business Group, the private and development banks, and academia. Meeting our target requires cooperation and collaboration, all maritime stakeholders, in particular raising awareness of climate change and further enhancing mutual understanding among member states. At IMO, working together with the member state and the maritime industry, we are committed to developing innovative global solutions while ensuring that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, partners, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to address you today. I thank His Excellency Mr. Moon Jae-in, President of the Republic of Korea, for giving me the opportunity to speak at the 2021 P4G Summit, where IUCN can highlight the opportunities for the global community to come together and build a green recovery from the pandemic. This is crucial, as nations worldwide are responding to the economic impact of COVID-19 by allocating trillions of dollars to fiscal stimulus packages. Although some have included green recovery measures, without overall coordination, this investment may increase the intense pressure on natural resources, deepening biodiversity loss and climate change. Today's global decision for recovery will impact us for decades. That is why IUCN has launched an international initiative called the Nature-Based Recovery, guiding investment to a nature-based and nature-positive recovery that supports global climate and biodiversity goals. This initiative, already well underway, capitalizes on IUCN broad convening power. We will work with governments to ensure investment for economic recovery do no additional harm to nature and livelihoods, and that at least 10% of the global recovery investment go towards protecting and restoring nature. The message is simple. Nature is a source of economic prosperity. We know this, but the business case is not yet fully mainstreamed. So what can we do? Firstly, promote the socio-economic benefits of investing in nature. There are many successful cases already. In Senegal, the world's largest mangrove reforestation project led investors to generate 500,000 tons of carbon offsets over 30 years. In addition, the delta protects arable land from salt contamination. It has restored rice paddies and replenished fish stocks by up to 18,000 additional tons per year. Secondly, create and implement policies and regulatory frameworks that integrate nature at their core, not only during the recovery phase, but also in the long run. And thirdly, politically promote the adoption of nature-based solutions at all levels. In the run-up to the UNFCCC COP in Glasgow and beyond, IUCN invites you to join us in this endeavor to truly make the nature-based recovery a reality. Thank you.
Good day, Excellencies. In the early 1930s, US President Franklin D. Roosevelt introduced the New Deal in an attempt to combat the effects of the Great Depression. The program had three main pillars: relief for the unemployed, recovery for the economy and job creation, reform for regulation and social welfare. In July of 2020, Korean President Moon Jae-in launched the Green New Deal, or Korean New Deal, or K New Deal, the $135 billion investments in green and digital technology, a timely and strategic initiative at the time wherein the COVID-19 global pandemic has significantly slowed economic growth, unleashed the unemployment crisis, worsened inequalities and livelihood in many countries worldwide. The world has to recover and needs to build back and stay on track to achieve economic prosperity, but we need to build back better. As communicated in the just concluded 16th session of the UN Forum on Forests, the pandemic has generated opportunities to build back better towards more inclusive and sustainable economies, including through forest restoration and sustainable use. The same has been emphasized at the official side event of the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit, organized by the Asian Forest Cooperation Organization, entitled Forest-Based Solution, a Green Path to Building Back Better. While there is no one-size-fits-all approach to address the present challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, the Asian Forest Cooperation Organization and its 13 member parties recognize the cross-cutting nature of issues related to forests. On our road to achieve an inclusive green recovery, countries all over the world should optimize the sustainable management of forests for water to irrigate our farmlands, for food production in order to achieve zero hunger, produce clean energy to power the industries, and create more job opportunities and address unemployment, for biodiversity and wildlife resources management in order to prevent future zoonotic diseases, for carbon storage and removal in order to sustain industrial production to power the economy, for ecotourism for the urban population to breathe, heal, and relax while generating revenue to forest-dependent people. We should integrate sustainable forest management into our COVID-19 recovery plans and in the global net zero initiative in order to offset many of the social, economic, and environmental impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. It should be emphasized that forest and forestry is not just a sector, but an activity and a process that could also provide synergies and co-benefits. Finally, we should take this opportunity to strengthen forest governance and harmonize policies, promote cross-sectoral collaboration with mining and agriculture to ensure optimal and efficient land use planning and create synergies. Kamsahamnida, mabuhay!
Frank and Yannick, personally, I'm so amazed to see carbon neutrality emerging as a pressing issue so quickly, capturing the minds of people. I wonder if we also find this recent development surprising.
Definitely. This is one of the greatest developments and reason for hope since the signature of the Paris Agreement. Over the past 2 years, 123 countries responsible for 63% of greenhouse gas emissions have adopted or are considering net zero targets. These net zero targets have put the Paris Agreement's goal within striking distance. A key challenge now is to translate this political commitment into detailed emission reduction pathways and financing plans.
Indeed, Anshul. Personally, I have worked on climate change issues for some 40 years, but suddenly this has now captured the passion of many young people, particularly the school strike for climate in 2019, with young people out in the streets demanding that their governments take stronger climate action, surprised me. And yes, carbon neutrality, or rather net zero 2050, has really become a rallying cry.
I totally share with you. This is why we should start looking into the issue of carbon neutrality first with the messages and the questions from the chair of the International Panel on Climate Change, a platform that presents the most scientific and defining evidence on climate change. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Dr. Lee Hwae-sung, chair of IPCC.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, let us now turn to the next guiding question that we will be discussing, which is carbon neutrality. IPCC's special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees, released in 2018, found that to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, CO2 emissions should decline 45% by 2030 relative to 2010, reaching net zero by 2050. Science is sending us a clear message to take immediate action. I would emphasize the importance of bringing together the two most urgent goals, green recovery and carbon neutrality. If we can align our short-term green stimulus packages to overcome the pandemic with climate goals and policies, we will certainly be better positioned to be on track to implement the Paris Agreement and achieve SDGs. As we begin our journey towards carbon neutrality, we understand that this goal faces many challenges. Assistance for developing countries in designing climate actions with the support of finance, technology, and capacity building will be important. As current technology has limits, investment in further developing existing and new technology will be of essence. These efforts will send clear message to the market. Joint climate actions will prevent more predictability and reliability, facilitating businesses to invest and seek market opportunities with confidence and sustainability. With these, we now turn to our two guiding questions. What our priorities are in achieving carbon neutrality, and what collaboration and support are required to reach this goal. I look forward to your enlightening views on these important questions. Thank you.
Now, we will listen to the speeches of leaders who have taken the initiative toward carbon neutrality. The countries and international organizations that will deliver the speech are European Council, Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Federal Republic of Germany, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, World Economic Forum, French Republic, Argentine Republic, UN Development Program, Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, Kingdom of Bhutan, International Energy Agency, New Zealand, Burkina Faso, UN Global Compact, Canada, Japan, International Renewable Energy Agency, Global Green Growth Institute.
I would like to thank the Republic of Korea for organizing this important summit. COVID-19 has consumed our attention for more than 1 year. But we all know there is another great challenge, because climate change has not taken a break during this pandemic. COVID has not diminished our climate goals. In fact, it has done exactly the opposite. It has sharpened our focus and intensified our resolve to protect our natural world. In the European Union, we launched our green transition well before the pandemic. In 2019, we took a landmark decision, committing to become the first carbon-neutral continent by 2050. And this led to our groundbreaking European Green Deal. In fact, COVID-19 has galvanized our resolve to transform the paradigm of our development model, from destructive short-term thinking towards a sustainable model that respects the life of our planet and the lives of our citizens. The COVID pandemic has been a double-edged sword. It has tested our societies like never before and forced us to take a hard look in the mirror at some weaknesses. But we've also seen our strengths. We've also seen the opportunities that lie ahead for our people, for our societies, and for our planet. We have a unique opportunity to build back our societies in a way that respects our planet. We want in Europe to be a global leader in climate action. We have big goals, and we have made robust commitments. We want to become the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. We want to reduce our carbon emissions by at least 55% by 2030. And for that to happen, we have mobilized a massive budget and recovery package, 1.8 trillion euros, never seen before. And this is our growth strategy for the future. Over 30% of our recovery package will go to greening our economies. And at least 20% will go to our digital priorities. This digital investment will have a direct impact on our climate objectives. For example, by improving the performance of supercomputers to make better climate decisions, or, for example, developing smart mobility. And digitizing our societies will have a wide-ranging impact, from driving research, innovation, and technology to creating jobs and modernizing our economies. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, this global challenge will require huge collective intelligence. Developed countries have a special responsibility to support those in need. In the Paris Agreement, developed countries committed to $100 billion per year in climate finance. G20 countries make up 85% of global GDP and 80% of global emissions. We have a duty to show leadership in reducing emissions. And we know that a number of solutions already exist, but we need the political will. We need more political will. First, by putting a price on carbon, and second, by developing green finance. We must come together as one international community to meet this urgent and vital challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, the world has paid a heavy price during COVID-19 in lives, in livelihoods, and in personal liberties. I would even say we have rediscovered a bit of modesty. We have come back to what matters most, the health of our families, of our communities, and the health of our planet. One world, one health, all of us in this together. Thank you.
The P4G Global Initiative is crucial to addressing the mounting challenges of climate change and accelerating the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Ethiopia has taken bold climate mitigation measures, such as launching an ambitious climate-resilient green economy strategy in 2011 at the COP17 in Durban, 4 years prior to the Paris Agreement. As part of our commitment to the Paris Agreement, in December 2020, we submitted a summary of our updated nationally determined contributions to the Secretariat of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. We are now fine-tuning the detailed outcomes of our NDCs to ensure we maintain our methodological robustness and inclusiveness of all concerned bodies. We are confident that the full technical report will be resubmitted in the next few weeks with actions to meet both mitigation and adaptation targets. Similarly, Ethiopia's new 10-year development plan, which runs from 2021 to 2030, is aligned with the updated NDCs and has our climate-resilient green economy strategy as one of its major pillars. We are also preparing the 2050 long-term low-emission development strategy as per the provision of the Paris Agreement, which will ensure we achieve carbon neutrality by or before 2050. These efforts are also complemented with our Green Legacy initiative of planting 20 billion tree seedlings by 2022. Over the last 2 years alone, we have planted more than 9 billion seedlings, which has created green jobs, especially for women and youth, for seedling preparation, planting, as well as harvesting. During the next 2 years, preparations are underway to plant more than 6 billion tree seedlings, including 1 billion in neighboring countries. Ethiopia is also partnering with the Republic of Korea on piloting the Peace Forest Initiative by launching the Agroforestry for People, peace and prosperity in coffee-growing regions of Ethiopia, with the aim of restoring ecosystems. The P4G Summit is being convened at a critical time when the international community should be coming together to strengthen our collective efforts to overcome the effects of the pandemic and share best practices in mitigating and adapting to the effects of climate change. Most importantly, public-private partnerships are vital to address challenges surrounding sustainable development and help partner countries of the initiative scale up their efforts. Therefore, the summit will help us chart a course to ensure solidarity and inclusiveness. We need to increase our collective efforts to build a greener economy that is faster and better than the existing business-as-usual growth model, which is insufficient for the challenges of the 21st century. I thank you.
Dear distinguished guests, I am pleased to address the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit, focusing on, quote unquote, the green recovery and the 2050 carbon neutrality. COVID-19 has shown us the consequences of neglecting global challenges, of which climate change is the most severe one we face. Atmospheric CO2 has increased by 50% since the Industrial Revolution, driving rapid global warming. Deforestation stands at 10 million hectares per year. The size of ocean dead zones doubles every decade, and around 1 million species risk extinction. Extreme weather has also become more severe, more frequent, and we are approaching tipping points for what are known as slow onset events. The OECD Green Recovery Database, measuring data from 43 countries, shows that only about 17% of overall COVID-19 stimulus is green. Only 17% of the stimulus is green. Now, it's almost an equal proportion is likely to have a negative or mixed impact. Countries' shorter-term policies must align with net zero and also broader well-being goals, as highlighted in our Environment Inequalities Nexus report. We have started a new international program for action on climate, so-called IPAC, to support countries to implement the goals of the Paris Agreement. And this is being done through a set of climate-related indicators, which are tailored recommendations and based on best practices. Now, dear friends, with COP26 taking place in November, it is vital that we seize the moment. The OECD stands with you to deliver ambitious action to achieve net zero by 2050. Remember that our most important intergenerational responsibility is to preserve and protect the planet. Thank you.
Exzellenzen, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, die weltweite Pandemielage ist ernst, aber der Klimawandel ist es nicht minder. Und das erfordert auch, über die Pandemie hinaus zu denken. In welcher Welt wollen wir morgen leben und was müssen wir heute dafür tun? Denn Tatsache ist, der Klimawandel bedroht mehr und mehr unsere Lebens- und Wirtschaftsgrundlagen. Daher gilt es, weltweit die großen Potenziale erneuerbarer Energien zu erschließen und im Gegenzug aus der Nutzung fossiler Energien auszusteigen. Es gilt, im Sinne von Nachhaltigkeit noch innovativer zu werden. Denken wir etwa an intelligente Effizienzlösungen, die Ressourcen und Kosten einsparen helfen, also ökonomischen und ökologischen Zielen gleichermaßen dienen. Wirksamer Klimaschutz erfordert auch einen marktwirtschaftlichen Rahmen. Daher setzen wir in Deutschland auf eine CO2-Bepreisung, und zwar neben den Sektoren Energie und Industrie auch bei Verkehr und Wärme. Bei allem, was wir dafür tun, um unser nationales Ziel der Klimaneutralität bereits bis 2045 zu erreichen, wissen wir, die nachhaltige Reduktion von Treibhausgasemissionen kann nur global gelingen. Deutschland hält daher seine Zusage für die internationale Klimafinanzierung ein. Und wir sind auch bereit, für ein neues Finanzierungsziel für die Zeit nach 2025 einen fairen Beitrag zu leisten. Deutschland hat zudem mit der Weltbank und weiteren Partnern die Green Recovery Initiative gegründet, um die Wirtschaftshilfen der Weltbank auf mehr Nachhaltigkeit hin auszurichten. Vor allem aber gilt es, weltweit deutlich mehr Privatkapital für Investitionen in den Klimaschutz zu mobilisieren. Gewiss, die Transformation hin zu mehr Nachhaltigkeit verlangt uns allen viel ab. Aber noch viel mehr gewinnen wir mit ihr. Wir erschließen uns Zukunft, statt sie zu verbrauchen. Daher danke ich allen, die daran mitwirken, unsere Welt resilienter und nachhaltiger zu gestalten. Nicht irgendwann, sondern jetzt. Nicht irgendwie, sondern ehrgeizig und entschlossen. Das ist das Signal, das ich mir von diesem Gipfel wünsche.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear friends, thank you for the opportunity to speak at this important summit, which comes at a critical time to galvanize governments, businesses, and civil society from across the globe into action to safeguard our planet and our shared future. For us in Jordan, the impact of climate change is a painful reality. It has unrecognizably transformed parts of our landscape and aspects of our ecosystem. Dead sea water levels have been shrinking at an average rate of 1 meter per year. We have one of the lowest levels of water availability per capita in the world. Diminishing aquifers and low rain accumulation are pressing concerns as we continue to share the little water we have with millions of refugees. Fully aware of the existential magnitude of climate change, Jordan has recently launched a national green growth action plan focused on green recovery from COVID-19, with measures to upscale energy efficiency, strengthen our resilience, and adaptation in water and agriculture, and mainstream climate change in our local development planning. Jordan has made strides adopting climate-smart public-private partnership frameworks, and we are party to key international environmental agreements, including the Paris Agreement, the Montreal Protocol, and the Rio Conventions. However, these agreements mean nothing without tangible progress in implementation to advance environmental stewardship for future generations and provide international support for nations on the front lines of climate change. An investment's success should no longer be measured merely through financial gain. Its environmental benefits and sustainability must be key. My friends, the threat of climate change is not the problem of one country or region alone. A drought in California, a flood in Kenya, or a wildfire in Australia, they all reverberate across the planet to threaten our very existence. God says in the Quran, the earth, God placed it for all creatures. It is our collective responsibility to make sure it stays that way. A sustainable, vibrant home for all.
Your Excellency, President Moon, distinguished participants, it's my great honor to join you for this leaders' session at the P4G Summit. At our summit here, we will all agree on the need for a speedy transition towards net zero carbon emissions and the regeneration of the Earth's environmental systems that we all so much rely on. In the past year, we have seen many businesses and governments raise their ambitions towards this goal. But to achieve our joint ambitions, it will be crucial to build and pursue the right innovations, the right business models, and also government policies. For our action, we will need more and better public-private cooperation. To this very end, the World Economic Forum would like to offer 5 clear outcome objectives. First, we need to raise industry ambition even further by supporting companies in all sectors to assess, sharpen, and adopt net zero commitments and science-based targets. Second, we need to ensure ambition can be translated into action. We'll help companies operationalize their commitments by engaging in supply chain or demand-driven initiatives, and help also governments engage in multi-stakeholder national partnership models. Third, we need to unlock innovative solutions by raising awareness of and driving investment to the latest bio-innovations, such as enhanced soil and crop carbon capture potential, clean technologies, and sustainable fuels for industrial processes. Fourth, we need to align financial markets by convening public and private finance and investor networks, and by mobilizing them for net zero transition finance. And fifth, we all have to support policy and political momentum by highlighting positive policy reforms, good examples, and by engaging with national, regional, and multilateral processes focused on accelerating net zero. For all those objectives, increased cooperation between governments and business is key. And the World Economic Forum, as the international organization for public-private cooperation, has made the restoration of our planet its foremost objective. Together, we can achieve the transition towards a net zero future. I'm glad to offer the World Economic Forum's full support for this joint global venture we take on together. Let's not waste this opportunity.
Annyeonghasimnika. Mesdames et messieurs, les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Monsieur le Président Moon, cher ami, la communauté scientifique nous alerte de façon de plus en plus précise chaque année sur le fait que si nous voulons donner une chance de survie à nos écosystèmes et aux générations qui nous succéderont, nous devons enrayer la crise climatique qui s'emballe. La première exigence est de relever notre propre ambition climatique pour 2030 et sa traduction immédiate en actes. La France, l'Union européenne, de nombreux autres pays se sont en effet engagés à la neutralité carbone à échéance 2050. Ce cap est essentiel. C'est notre référence, ce qui permettra de changer nos systèmes en profondeur avec justement suffisamment de temps. Mais il n'a de sens que s'il est accompagné d'un véritable plan d'action pour y parvenir et d'un cap à plus court terme. C'est ce plan que l'Union européenne a mis sur la table, avec l'objectif de réduction des émissions de 55% en 2030 par rapport à 1990 et le fameux Green Deal pour lui donner corps. Ce plan ambitieux sera précisé, décliné d'ici la COP. Au-delà des nouvelles technologies, l'évolution de nos modèles de production et de consommation, en particulier pour nous libérer de notre dépendance aux énergies fossiles, nécessite de donner un prix au carbone. Nous en sommes encore très loin. Moins d'un quart des émissions mondiales ont un coût. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous devons élargir le périmètre du marché carbone, notamment au secteur maritime. C'est aussi pourquoi nous travaillons à la mise en place d'un mécanisme d'ajustement carbone aux frontières. Il permettra de préserver l'efficacité de notre propre politique climatique et d'assurer l'équité pour nos entreprises et nos travailleurs, et d'inciter chacun à converger vers un modèle de plus en plus ambitieux. C'est une question de cohérence. La seconde exigence, c'est l'intégrité et la transparence. Il est temps en effet de définir clairement et précisément ce qu'est un investissement compatible avec l'accord de Paris. C'est l'objectif de l'Union européenne là aussi. C'est ce même esprit d'intégrité environnementale qui doit guider les efforts pour mobiliser les entreprises comme les investisseurs autour de la COP. C'est l'enjeu de la Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, TCFD, que toutes les entreprises françaises du CAC 40 ont désormais rejoint et que j'appelle à élargir et approfondir. La troisième exigence, c'est que cette transition doit être juste et solidaire. En effet, la transition doit être juste et solidaire dans chacun de nos pays pour permettre aussi bien aux familles, à nos citoyennes et nos citoyens qu'aux entreprises de faire ce chemin et qu'il soit progressivement rentable, mais que les plus fragiles ne soient pas laissés sur le bord. Mais elle doit aussi être solidaire au niveau international. Le changement climatique aura en effet un impact violent sur les pays les plus vulnérables, dans une injustice absolument confondante, puisqu'ils sont les victimes des pollutions passées et des modèles de développement des pays déjà riches. Ils ont eux-mêmes à s'adapter et sont les premiers à vivre les conséquences bien souvent de nos erreurs d'hier. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous avons organisé le sommet du 18 mai sur le financement durable des économies africaines. Parce que l'Afrique ne peut pas être piégée dans la trappe de l'économie fossile alors que le reste du monde serait passé dans l'ère de l'économie décarbonée. Elle doit retrouver les moyens de financer ces transitions, le déploiement à grande échelle des énergies renouvelables. Chers collègues, ce sommet est un moment décisif si nous voulons être au rendez-vous du grand défi de notre siècle. J'en suis intimement convaincu. Mais nous sommes aujourd'hui en retard. Il n'y a pas là de catastrophisme à avoir, nous ne sommes pas perdus, et je ne fais pas partie de celles et ceux qui pensent que nous n'avons aucun espoir. Je crois même profondément que si nous savons investir, innover, accompagner le changement de manière solidaire et responsable, notre avenir est à écrire. Mais il nous faut pour cela accélérer l'allure, construire les bases du succès de la COP26 sur cette triple exigence d'ambition concrète, d'intégrité et de justice. La neutralité carbone s'impose partout comme notre horizon commun. D'ici là, ne lâchons rien, car le temps presse. Et chacun doit être au rendez-vous. Nous ferons tout pour y être, en redoublant d'efforts, en redoublant d'investissements, en continuant à accélérer. Et nous avons besoin d'être tous ensemble pour nous coordonner. Je vous remercie et bon travail.
Estimado presidente, para Argentina es un honor participar en esta cumbre de Seúl del P4G. Como ya expresáramos en ocasión de la cumbre sobre el clima organizada por Estados Unidos el 22 de abril pasado, Argentina ha puesto a la acción climática y ambiental en el centro de sus convicciones. En el marco del Acuerdo de París, nuestro país está comprometido en lograr avances ambiciosos que le permitan a la comunidad internacional mantener el aumento de la temperatura media mundial muy por debajo de los 2 grados centígrados con relación a los niveles preindustriales y proseguir los esfuerzos para limitar ese aumento de la temperatura a 1,5 grados centígrados con respecto a dichos niveles. Como muestra de nuestro compromiso, en diciembre del 2020 presentamos una segunda contribución determinada a nivel nacional y he instruido para que su ambición sea elevada aún más, hasta lograr una mejora del 27,7% respecto a la de 2016, 2 puntos porcentuales adicionales a la presentada en 2020. Para alcanzar la neutralidad carbónica en el año 2050, debemos comprometernos en recorrer un camino que combine el impulso de cambios estructurales a largo plazo y un conjunto de acciones graduales, pero decisivas en el corto plazo. A través de la búsqueda de la eficiencia y la innovación, debemos promover la transición energética, el transporte sostenible, la preservación de ecosistemas como nuestros bosques, humedales y océanos, una transformación productiva sostenible y la mejora en la gestión integral de los residuos y de los recursos. Ello nos permitirá generar empleos de calidad y mejorar nuestra competitividad en un marco de transición justa que no deje a nadie atrás. Es importante que la comunidad internacional comprenda que nuestros esfuerzos en aumentar la resiliencia y ambición climática y ambiental no bastan por sí solos. Es necesario lograr una mayor movilización y provisión de recursos financieros, creación de capacidades y transferencia de tecnología por parte de los países desarrollados a los países en desarrollo, a la luz del principio de responsabilidades comunes pero diferenciadas. Por sobre todo, es fundamental renovar la arquitectura financiera internacional a través de la movilización de recursos concesionales y no reembolsables, canalizados a través de la banca multilateral y bilateral con procesos ágiles y transparentes. También mecanismos de pagos por servicios ecosistémicos y canjes de deuda por acción climática. ¿Por qué no pensar en una asignación de los derechos especiales de giro sin discriminar a los países de renta media para mejorar nuestro ambiente? También la reconfiguración de los análisis que realizan las calificadoras de riesgo para no distorsionar la realidad de nuestros países. Y la atención a los fenómenos de sobreendeudamiento irresponsable provocados antes de la pandemia y agravados durante el virus, otorgando mayor flexibilidad de plazos, tasas y condiciones. Estimado presidente, Argentina reconoce esta cumbre como del P4G como una valiosa instancia previa a la COP26 para avanzar en la construcción de los consensos que nuestras sociedades demandan. Los desafíos por delante solo los podremos superar a través de la cooperación y la solidaridad entre las naciones. No hay tiempo que perder. Muchas gracias.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the Republic of Korea and P4G for this invitation to address you today. We are in the throes of a triple crisis, from the relentless march of climate change to the continued degradation and destruction of ecosystems and biodiversity, to the unprecedented consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. All three are inextricably linked. They are a manifestation of humanity pushing past the limits that can sustain us on this planet. At this turning point for our civilization, I see two priority areas for action. Firstly, we must ensure a just transition. That means putting a price on carbon, shifting taxation from income to carbon, reforming policy on fossil fuel subsidies, and accelerating investments in renewable energy and green infrastructure. And we must assist communities that depend on fossil fuels to adapt to a green economy, including through new skills and strengthening social protection. Closing the energy access gap will also require significant public and private finance, approximately $41 billion per year. However, the cost of renewables continues to plunge, slowly rendering fossil fuel subsidies obsolete. As we work towards the high-level dialogue on energy later this year, momentum is growing. More and more countries and businesses are embarking upon a path to clean, affordable energy for all by the year 2030 and net zero emissions by the year 2050. And this just transition will create millions of new green jobs that will pay better. Secondly, we need to boost cooperation across governments, the United Nations and the private sector. Nations need to develop a more cooperative co-investment mindset that prompts more long-term awareness about which policies are really in a country's best interest. Look, for example, to the United Nations Development Programme's Climate Promise. As they enhance their nationally determined contributions, over 70 countries are now unlocking new sources of private finance which can be used to invest in renewable energy, just to take one example. Indeed, businesses that have embraced the Sustainable Development Goals are asking themselves, what kind of society do we want to live in, And what are we going to do about it? If we want to keep celebrating Earth Day, these are the questions that all of us need to be asking. With COP26 now on the horizon, we are seeing the emergence of a collective will to build forward better and greener. We have more technology, we have more science, and we have more holistic levels of stimulus packages available, all of which we can deploy to slash carbon emissions and contribute to saving our planet. So now is the moment to decide if our legacy will be a decade lost or a decade of transformation. Thank you.
Dear friends, I had intended to participate in person at the P4G summit in Seoul. The pandemic did not allow us this to happen, but I would like to thank President Moon for his steadfast commitment for holding this summit today. Like the fight against the pandemic, the fight against climate change will not succeed without global action. The pandemic is a powerful reminder that a global crisis can only be solved by increased multilateral cooperation. No country can overcome the challenges on its own. In that respect, I would like to commend the Republic of Korea for its commitment to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050 and for ending public finance assistance for the construction of overseas coal power plants. In Luxembourg, the Parliament has recently adopted a climate law. It enshrines the objectives of reaching climate neutrality by 2050 at the latest and of reducing the emissions of greenhouse gas by 55% in 2030. Our climate action is part of the European Union's plan to make Europe the first climate-neutral continent. As the world emerges from the pandemic, it is our collective duty to seize the moment and build back better while tackling the climate and biodiversity crisis. We will need to mobilize financial and human capital and ensure that the green and sustainable new infrastructures and technologies are the backbone of any post-COVID-19 recovery, which will allow to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. There are multiple areas of cooperation. For example, Luxembourg steel engineers are committed to assist in development of new technologies required for the production of green steel. Energy storage and the production of batteries for electric vehicles are other avenues for Korean-Luxembourg climate cooperation. Luxembourg is also directly supporting the green finance transition in developing and emerging countries. We are, for instance, working with the Global Green Growth Institute based here in Seoul on the Green Bond Readiness Program in Vietnam. However, governments cannot do it alone. The financial sector is a key part of the solution to climate change by contributing to shift from billions to trillions in sustainable investment. Luxembourg has long been a pioneer in the area of sustainable finance, connecting investors across the world. Today, the Luxembourg Green Exchange lists more than half of the world's green bonds. To conclude, the latest studies show that we are not on track to reach the targets of the Paris Agreement. As the urgency continues to grow, so does our ambition, our responsibility to act. I'm convinced that the P4G initiative will contribute to speed up our efforts and build pathways to a resilient and low-carbon economy. Thank you so much for your initiative.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, from the land of gross national happiness, I convey the warm greetings of His Majesty the King, Her Majesty the Queen, and the people of Bhutan. It is an honor to be part of this summit, to be among the passionate leaders of P4G and of course our host, President Moon. We are happy to follow that the Republic of Korea has been making significant strides in the fight against climate change over the years. During the recent Leaders Summit, I was impressed to hear Your Excellencies share about your plans of new NDCs and the expansion of green finance in the renewable energy sector. Moreover, your initiatives to bring nations together to focus on green recovery around this time of the pandemic is very timely and relevant. Thank you very much for the invitation. For Bhutan, our successive monarchs adopted a non-compromising approach to safeguard our environment. Our constitution requires us to maintain a minimum of 60% forest cover at all times to come. For now, we have 71%. It also mandates us to ensure sustainable use of natural resources and maintain intergenerational equity. These strong and favorable legal foundations make it easier for us in our conservation effort. To complement, we have the development philosophy of gross national happiness to guide us. It focuses on the collective happiness and considers the well-being of others before self. It is for this reason that our natural heritage is still intact even as we choose to modernize. Today, it also enables us to leapfrog into a technological era while skipping the industrialization phase. As we move forward, guided by the visions of our monarchs, we have the right conditions to adopt more green and renewable path to sustain our carbon negative status. Excellencies, we must keep reminding ourselves about the consequences of climate change. It is not something that will happen in distant future. It is happening now. I always choose to remind that if not for the next generation, at least we can think about ourselves and start acting. I say this from my medical experience for almost 2 decades, from the changes in the skin texture of my patients, to the onset and types of cancers that they present with, to the newer kinds of birth defects in the newborns, and even the COVID-19 infection that we are fighting today. All reflect the worsening health of our environment. Finally, I remember my phone conversation with President Moon last April. His forthcoming nature and the support he offered for Bhutan's COVID-19 combat was very encouraging. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It gives me the confidence to say that this P4G Summit too, under your guidance, will see a huge success as we all march together towards a carbon-neutral planet. I look forward to closely following the discussions. Thank you very much and Tashidele.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to commend Korea for the leadership it is demonstrating as host of the P4G Seoul Summit today. As of today, 44 countries have a net zero emissions target. These pledges are met by governments of countries accounting for around 70% of global CO2 emissions. It is clear that the level of commitment to fight climate change has never been higher. This is excellent news. But commitments alone are not enough. We need real change in the real world. Right now, the data does not match the rhetoric, and the gap is getting wider. Our latest estimates for emissions in 2021 are a warning for humanity. They are on track for the second largest increase in the history. Yet, there are grounds for optimism. Electricity generated from renewables will break records this year, and the sales of electric cars will reach another record high. But getting to net zero emissions requires much more than that. We will need to transform our entire energy system. This means drastically cutting emissions from trucks, ships, and planes. We will also need to do the same for steel and cement factories. We have many technologies at our disposal today: energy efficiency, solar, wind, electric cars, and many more. And we need to deploy these as quickly as possible. However, we, the International Energy Agency, just released a roadmap for how the global energy sector can reach net zero by 2050. It shows that almost half of the reductions will need to come from technologies that are not yet ready for the market. They are under development. This calls for massive leaps in innovation. Innovation across batteries, hydrogen, synthetic fuels, carbon capture and storage, and many other technologies. But we cannot meet this twin challenge: scaling up the use of technologies that are already with us today and innovate the ones that are not yet ready without much greater international collaboration. In fact, our analysis shows that it would take many, many more years to reach net zero if countries don't work towards to quicken the pace of innovation across clean energy technologies. Of course, this would be unacceptable. This is why this summit comes at such a critical time. We need to work together to achieve our goals and create a better future for all of us. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou katoa and hello to all. Almost 6 years ago, in 2015, countries agreed to strive to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Our goal today has to be to deliver on this promise. It's time to put in place the policies and plans that will get us to carbon neutrality by 2050. I see 6 key areas that will help us make real progress. First, we must each commit to a long-term neutrality target. We would go further to suggest that it should be built into domestic legislation and make the heart of your country's action supported as broadly as possible. It's your lodestar. Second, backcast from the neutrality target to ramp up nationally determined contributions to ensure we're each doing our part in reducing emissions in line with our 1.5 degree limit objective. Third, let's make sure all financial decisions support low emissions development. This is why New Zealand's Sovereign Wealth Fund has joined 13 others in the One Planet Sovereign Wealth Funds framework. Together, we're ensuring climate action is factored into how we invest over $30 trillion US. Fourth, let's explore how trade can help address climate change. New Zealand and 5 other countries are making trade, climate change and sustainable development mutually reinforcing by negotiating the Agreement for Climate Change, Trade and Sustainability. We can also use trade rules to end fossil fuel subsidies. We would welcome your support to put fossil fuel subsidies firmly on the WTO's long-term agenda through a renewed WTO ministerial statement in November. In tandem, New Zealand's hosting of APEC 21 is also driving fossil fuel subsidy reform. Fifth, New Zealand is dedicated to innovation for reducing agricultural emissions. In a world first, we will be pricing agricultural emissions, and we're collaborating with over 50 countries through the Global Research Alliance to share research and best practice to manage emissions and support food security. Finally, we need easily accessible climate finance. Our Pacific neighbours have identified climate change as the single biggest threat to their livelihoods, security and well-being. We must do more to help countries take climate action and adapt to the impacts of climate change. Effective global action on climate change needs us to work together, to share technology, resources and tools that limit global warming. Ma whiro, ma pango, ka oti ai te mahi. If everyone does their part, the work will be done.
18세기 산업혁명으로부터 2021년 현재에 이르기까지 인류는 눈부신 산업의 발전을 일궈냈습니다. 이는 지구가 인류에게 바치는 선물이며 다음 세대에게 살기 좋은 세상을 전하는 첫발이 될 것입니다. 바로 오늘 인류는 더 밝은 미래로 나아갑니다.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Monsieur le Secrétaire général des Nations Unies, distinguées personnalités, Mesdames et Messieurs, le Burkina Faso salue l'institution du sommet P4G en tant qu'initiative mondiale visant à accélérer la réponse au changement climatique et à atteindre les objectifs de développement durable basés sur des partenariats publics-privés pour générer une croissance inclusive et durable. La tenue du présent sommet est la preuve, s'il en est besoin encore, de notre résilience collective et de notre ferme engagement à dialoguer conjointement sur le climat. Nous en sommes reconnaissants au président et au gouvernement et au peuple sud-coréen. Pour des pays très vulnérables aux chocs climatiques comme le Burkina Faso et les petits États insulaires, notre option est claire et consiste à ne pas dépasser 1,5 degré Celsius de réchauffement climatique. C'est pourquoi mon pays apprécie la solidarité mondiale manifestée par le peuple américain à travers le retour des États-Unis d'Amérique dans l'accord de Paris sous la conduite du président Joe Biden. Pour atteindre l'objectif de la neutralité carbone, nous devons accélérer le financement des actions de réduction des émissions et accroître la capacité de résilience des pays en développement. Aussi, le transfert de technologies propres et adaptées aux nouvelles exigences de développement doit-il être pris en considération dans le financement de la coopération internationale tout en levant les contraintes liées à l'accès équitable et dans le respect du principe de la responsabilité commune mais différenciée. C'est en cela que je réaffirme la nécessité pour l'ensemble des États, et en particulier les pays donateurs, de veiller au respect de leurs engagements, de se pencher sur la reconstitution des fonds climat. C'est pourquoi nous plaidons ici pour le financement de nombreuses initiatives visant l'opérationnalisation de l'accord de Paris, notamment le plan d'investissement climat du Sahel pour faire face à la crise humanitaire et à la menace sécuritaire grandissante. Pour sa part, le Burkina Faso, convaincu que la neutralité carbone est encore possible d'ici à 2050, s'est déjà engagé dans ce processus de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre avec la ferme détermination de mettre en œuvre les actions et réformes qui permettront d'atteindre les objectifs poursuivis par la plateforme P4G en matière de sécurité alimentaire, d'eau potable, d'énergie propre, de villes durables et d'économie circulaire. Le sommet P4G de Séoul 2021 devrait justement créer une synergie mutuelle pour une construction collective et solidaire en faveur de l'environnement et du climat pour une neutralité carbone effective. Plein succès à nos travaux. Je vous remercie.
Excellencies, business leaders, ladies and gentlemen, and friends. Greetings. I'm Sando Jambo, the CEO and Executive Director of the United Nations Global Compact. It is a pleasure to greet all of you today, including colleagues from the Global Compact local network in the Republic of Korea. I can't think of a more important issue than the one that brings us together today: the urgent need for a green recovery from the COVID-19 crisis, a recovery that leads us to global carbon neutrality. A net zero carbon future has become the North Star for climate action, and with good reason. To limit the worst impacts of climate change, we must decarbonize every sector of the economy and accelerate the transition to clean energy. We must halve greenhouse gas emissions worldwide by 2030, and we must reach net zero emissions by 2050. To achieve this essential goal, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called on the international community to work in coalition across sectors. And in recent months, we've seen more governments and more companies responding with commitments to follow a pathway to net zero. This is indeed positive, but promises have to be backed up by concrete plans to cut emissions in absolute terms. Businesses must remain accountable for their impact on climate. Their plans and their targets have to be steeped in climate science. To that end, the UN Global Compact is a partner in the Science Based Targets Initiative, which is developing the first global standard for net zero business practices. We are also promoting Business Ambition for 1.5 degrees Celsius, our global campaign to help limit warming to the critical threshold of 1.5 degrees. And since we launched it in 2019, more than 500 companies with a market cap of more than $13 trillion have joined the campaign. And now, moving forward, we need the number of committed companies to grow from hundreds to thousands to achieve the impact that we desire. We also need more visionary business leaders calling on governments to boldly imagine a green recovery and a fairer, healthier, and safer world. Thank you. I wish you continued productive discussions, and I look forward to seeing their outcome in the Seoul Declaration.
We need decisive action if we are to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius and to thereby avert catastrophic impacts of climate change. Achieving net zero emissions by mid-century, which science tells us we must, represents a significant challenge, but also a tremendous opportunity. Une telle transition peut représenter un chemin vers une croissance économique durable tout en protégeant la santé de notre planète. Fortunately, we see momentum for bold climate action is growing. Governments, businesses, and consumers are all moving in the same direction. Plus de 120 pays se sont maintenant engagés à atteindre la carboneutralité, dont le Canada. Certainly, we witnessed a significant acceleration of ambition in the lead-up to COP26. Just a few weeks ago, Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union, and Japan announced ambitious new emissions targets for 2030, putting approximately half of the world's GDP on a path to achieving the 1.5 degree centigrade goal. A key part of Canada's plan to achieve its climate goals is the commitment to phase out the use of thermal coal by 2030. The phase out of thermal coal, which is responsible for 20% of global emissions, is the single most important step the world can take to meet Paris goals. Some of the larger economies that pleasantly produce significant amounts of coal-fired electricity, China, Japan, the United States, and South Korea, have committed to achieving carbon neutrality. However, for bold targets to be achievable, we must all ensure they are accompanied by bold action. And for developing economies, we must consider how coal phase-out can be done in a way that enables economic progress. Canada co-chairs the Powering Past Coal Alliance with the United Kingdom. This is a growing coalition of countries, companies, and financial institutions dedicated to domestic phase-out and to working with others to make rapid progress on global phase-out. The alliance is currently focusing in part on defining pathways and considering financial instruments that can help to accelerate progress. I would like to acknowledge Korea's important work on thermal coal, including its recent announcement to end overseas financing of coal. And I would note that 6 Korean provinces and cities are now members of the PPCA. I'd also like to acknowledge the P4G for its focus on engaging both public and private sectors in finding solutions to key issues. Nous aurons besoin d'une approche coopérative et collaborative pour parvenir à des résultats positifs. Let's all rededicate ourselves to strong action at home and to active international engagement to define and actively pursue pathways to net zero. Through such efforts, we can and we will create a more resilient and healthy future for our economies, our environment, and our people. Thank you very much.
Let me begin by thanking President Moon Jae-in and the government of the Republic of Korea for hosting the P4G Seoul Summit. We are facing a significant global crisis, such as the coronavirus pandemic, climate change, and biodiversity loss. In response, it is essential to redesign our socio-economic system to make it sustainable and resilient. To this end, Japan is accelerating its efforts to make 3 transitions: the transition to a decarbonized society, the transition to a circular economy, and the transition to a decentralized society. We've made our commitment to decarbonization clear. At the climate summit in April, Prime Minister Suga announced Japan's target to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 46% in 2030 from its 2013 level. In addition, Japan will continue strenuous efforts in its challenge to meet the goal of cutting its emissions by 50%. Just this week, the Diet has passed an amended law making the carbon neutral target for 2050 legally binding and ensuring its policy continuity. 46% is an ambitious target in line with the long-term 2050 goal. But by setting an ambitious target together, we can create a significant momentum towards carbon neutrality in the international community, including major emitting countries. Climate action in local communities is important, and we have an essential role to play in promoting their actions. In Japan, 390 cities have committed to becoming zero-carbon cities by 2050. To help them put this commitment into action, we are formulating a roadmap for local climate action. This includes accelerating the creation of leading models of carbon-neutral regions intensively in the next 5 years up to 2025, and expanding a series of decarbonization domino effects among local communities. Our ambition does not stop in Japan. We want to see such domino effects spreading to the world. To make that happen, we support city-to-city collaboration between Japanese and foreign cities. Back in March, with the cooperation of Tokyo, Kuala Lumpur declared itself to become carbon neutral by 2050. This is the first case of a cross-border decarbonization domino. The effort of redesigning will never be easy, but we hope to work with the international community to advance our joint work of redesigning the global socio-economic system for future generations. Let's work together. Thank you. Arigato.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to provide IRENA's net zero perspective from the agency vantage point as a global voice for the energy transition. I would like to highlight 3 points. First, it is imperative to have a coherent response to today's economic crisis that also addresses future needs. IRENA's World Energy Transition Outlook links short-term action with the medium and long-term objective of sustainable development and the 1.3-degree Paris Agreement goals. It outlines the future energy system based on renewable power and complemented by green hydrogen and modern bioenergy. Accelerating the energy transition will add 5.5 million net jobs, this in the coming 3 years, and increase global GDP by 1% annually. Second, achieving carbon neutrality requires unprecedented levels of international cooperation. This to ensure that we all move forward together and no one is left behind. In these defining years of the high-level dialogue of energy of COP26, countries must be decisive in raising ambition on NDCs while at the same time prepare the ground for their concrete implementation. Third, we cannot allow having a dual track for energy transition, where some countries rapidly turn green and others remain trapped in the fossil fuel system of the past. Coal has no place in carbon neutral economy. Global solidarity will be crucial. From technology diffusion, regional strategies, and common innovation efforts to financial strategies and support. This brings me to my final but still critical message. Policies to adapt and accelerate the energy transition must go hand in hand with just and inclusive transition measures. Holistic approaches will allow us to build resilience, drive global economy, and create jobs for an inclusive and sustainable green growth. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much.
President Moon, thank you for inviting me to this P4G summit at a time when so many people struggle with the pandemic and so many countries are still in the middle of a terrible economic crisis as a consequence. Trillions of dollars have been mobilized by G20 governments to fight the recession and protect people's livelihoods. Not enough governments have followed the example set by the European Union and your government to ensure that this huge economic stimulus is green and accelerates the transition to a green economy. The Korean Green New Deal, combined with your pledge for net zero by 2050 and your pledge to end support for coal projects in Korea and internationally, leads the way in Asia. President Moon, following the recent commitments by President Biden for a 50% emission reduction by 2030 and Prime Minister Suga for a 46% reduction by 2030, a similar commitment from your government at this P4G summit will send a strong signal that the Republic of Korea is stepping up to face the climate crisis and will fight to see the return of blue skies in Korea. Not all countries have access to stimulus funding like the Republic of Korea, and few have managed to avoid the worst consequences of the pandemic as well as Korea. Many of GDGI's developing and emerging economy member countries are questioning whether a Green New Deal makes sense for them, and if so, how to fund such a green transition. GDGI argues that green growth is the only option for all countries for a sustainable and inclusive future. Investments in green buildings, renewable energy, electric mobility, climate-smart agriculture, and nature-based solutions bring more employment than their fossil fuel conventional alternatives, which is a critical argument for a green recovery. As many of these green investment opportunities have become commercially attractive, much of the transition can be financed by the private sector. With your support, GDGI is developing such green investment projects for our member countries and is able to match those with private sector investors. Some green investments, and particularly those related to climate change adaptation, do rely on public support, either completely or to bring on board private investors. That is why increasing the green share of development funding and increasing climate finance is so important. GDGI urges the Republic of Korea and all other donor countries attending the P4G summit to raise the green share of your ODA to 50% by 2030, to support the green recovery from COVID around the globe and step up the fight against the climate crisis. GDGI stands ready to partner with all of you for green growth and the global goals. President Moon, I wish you and all other summit participants an excellent P4G summit.
If we could liken the P4G summit to a bird, one of its wings would be the cooperation between the public and private actors. Frank, Yannick, what do you think?
Well, we need governments to step up to make net zero pledges backed up by ambitious NDCs for 2030 as milestones to carbon neutrality. Most of the funding required for the green transition will have to be invested by the private sector. Public-private partnerships are therefore critical, Yanchul. We must use the scarce public funding, development assistance and climate finance to draw in, to bring on board the private sector.
We imperatively need public-private partnership to reach our climate goals. This is something that the Green Climate Fund is prioritizing. In particular, we are developing new ways to blend public and private finance to increase the flow of private investment in developing countries for both greenhouse gas emission reduction, adaptation to climate change, and ecosystem protection and restoration.
The third theme of the leader's speech is on public-private cooperation. We will begin with the message and questions from Mr. Lim Gi-taek, Secretary General of the IMO. Now, let us invite Mr. Lim to deliver his remarks on public-private cooperation. Secretary General Lim, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Our final theme is on partnerships. For several decades, we have exerted efforts to address climate change and pursue sustainable development. We have set global goals such as the Paris Agreement and SDGs. Although governments and international organizations have and will continue to pursue the global goals, we need reinforcement. We need the engagement of diverse stakeholders, scaled-up financing and investment, innovative ideas and technology, most of all, creative partnerships. If we can bring together governments, international organizations, businesses, and the civil society to secure more funding on bankable projects that have potential in the market, I'm quite certain that it will have a significant impact in achieving our global goals. Recent investment trend and rising interest of businesses to pursue ESG is certainly encouraging. What still needs to be enhanced are public-private partnerships that really make a difference. At IMO, we have placed an increasing focus on generation of such partnerships and projects. The P4G initiative, through its vast networks of partners around the globe, will be instrumental in nurturing public-private partnerships that will provide viable intervention in support of our common goals. Now we will continue our discussion on this very topic. I look forward to your views on the challenges and potential solutions to support public-private partnerships. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is yours.
The efforts of countries to promote public-private cooperation would be indeed vital. The third theme, public-private partnership, is to be addressed by the following countries and international organizations: Kingdom of Belgium, Republic of Chile, Kingdom of Norway, People's Republic of Bangladesh, Kingdom of Spain, Kingdom of Sweden, Republic of El Salvador, Republic of Finland, Republic of Fiji, United Mexican States, Green Climate Fund, World Resources Institute, Pakistan.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, the single biggest challenge of our lifetime is climate change, because we are at a tipping point right now, a tipping point that requires action. And I believe it is our duty to seize this climate crisis as an opportunity to embrace innovation, to speed up the development of new technologies in order to create a more sustainable society. Because only new technologies and innovation will save us. That is also why Belgium dedicates 60% of its multi-billion euro recovery plan to low-carbon investments and to climate-resilient technologies. More than ever, we choose to invest in our current strengths, like the development of hydrogen technology. We will continue to build our renewable energy infrastructure on land and in the sea. And we have the ambition to transform our housing and transportation markets to make them carbon neutral. That is also why my government wholeheartedly supports the European climate law and the European ambition to become climate neutral by 2050. If all countries work towards the same goal, we will be able to stop climate change and reverse it. And we will be able to build a healthier living environment for our children and grandchildren. That is why I am also happy to see that this P4G summit takes the same broad view on climate change as Belgium. This is not just a crisis of greenhouse gases and carbon emissions. It should also be about making our living environment healthier. It should be about clean water, sustainable cities, sustainable farming, and building a circular economy. It is about protecting those who face the greatest risks for the moment. Belgium tries to do that through its development cooperation. And we strongly believe that public grants alone cannot solve the issue. We need to partner up with the private sector to merge not only our budgets, but also our best ideas. If private companies and the public sector work together, we can pick up the pace and scale up the size of our efforts. That's the way forward. Just like we did when developing the COVID vaccines, where private companies and government gave the best of themselves to make the impossible possible. With the same spirit, we need to fight climate change by working together, by being focused on the task ahead, and by investing in science and innovation. So let me thank the Republic of Korea for the opportunity to speak as a guest, and I wish you all a very productive P4G summit.
Good morning. Greetings to all of you in these difficult times, and a special thanks to the Republic of Korea, the host country of this 2021 P4G Seoul Summit, for bringing together the governments and the international community to pursue together an inclusive green recovery towards carbon neutrality. We are currently facing one of the major global health crises of the last century. The coronavirus pandemic has not only meant the tragic loss of more than 3 million lives across the planet, it has also caused huge pressures to our health systems, a global economic crisis, the destruction of jobs and businesses, and a threat to investment, to our economies and to our future. But the COVID-19 pandemic must not overshadow the threat of climate change, which is not in quarantine. Like coronavirus, the climate crisis has a profound impact on our people's lives. And facing it decisively and with a sense of urgency is an ethical imperative. We must act against climate change with the same determination that we have displayed in fighting COVID-19. Chile is already doing its part. Even though we are a small country, responsible for only 0.25% of the world's total greenhouse emissions, we have understood our own responsibility and our contribution in this global fight. Today, we have an opportunity to address COVID-19 and climate change together. In this context, we are introducing our plan for a green recovery, which comprises concrete and multi-sectoral initiatives to rebuild our economy on a sustainable manner and to accelerate our transition to a net zero emission country. Our green recovery plan will mobilize $4.5 billion of public investment, roughly 30% of our COVID Special Recovery Fund, in order to accelerate climate action and to create and support multiple projects across the country, which will allow us to create thousands of quality jobs. This plan rests on 5 pillars. First, energy transition. Our goal is to clean our electricity generation capacity, achieving 70% renewable generation before 2030 and 95% before 2050. In order to accomplish this decarbonization strategy of our energy matrix, Chile has committed to retire 50% of its coal-fired plants by 2025 and 100% before 2040. Second, green hydrogen. Chile can and will become the most efficient producer of green hydrogen in the world. In order to reach this goal, before 2030, we are in the process of developing a competitive green hydrogen industry, using electricity produced with low-cost, renewable, and clean resources. Next month, we will begin building our first plant of green hydrogen. Third, forest and biodiversity. We are harnessing nature's ability to absorb carbon by planting 250,000 hectares of trees. We have also launched our national wetland policy to protect 40 wetlands of international relevance. And finally, we are promoting the creation of the first marine protected area in the high seas, in the Nazca Ridge, an area identified as greatly rich in biodiversity. Fourth, water efficiency. Last year, our country established its national water policy to face water scarcity. And finally, fifth, sustainable cities, pollution mitigation and circular economy. We are aiming to base 100% of our public transport system on electricity or electric vehicles by 2040. We recently published a new energy efficiency law, and this year we will publish our first circular economy roadmap. These initiatives respond to a long-term vision that will guide our sustainable economic recovery post-COVID-19 and will allow us to achieve carbon neutrality before 2050. A green recovery is a crucial pillar for building back better after COVID-19, unlocking investment opportunities and repairing the economic damage of this pandemic. Thank you very much.
To successfully fight climate change, we need global net zero emissions around 2050. We need to get there in 3 decades. We need to act today. The solutions we need are available. We see more ambitious policies and goals. The private sector is positioning itself for a net zero future. The world's largest economies plan for climate neutrality. Still, our ambitions don't put us on the track to keep temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. Countries that have not yet submitted enhanced targets under the Paris Agreement should do so, well before COP26 in Glasgow. I commend Korea's decision to strengthen its climate target and to end public financing of coal-fired power plants overseas. Goals alone will not bring us to net zero. Governments will have to put in place effective climate policies. In Norway, we see climate policy as the sum of all our efforts. It is how we transform and equip the country for the future. We harness the power of public-private resources through regulatory measures and requirements, combined with support and collaboration. Companies committed to long-term sustainable value creation help make change happen. This has put Norway in a world-leading position in areas such as green shipping, offshore wind, and carbon capture and storage. Recently, together with other governments and leading companies, we launched an international public-private collaboration, the LEAF Coalition. LEAF will support tropical forest countries in reducing their emissions from deforestation. The world's forests are key to net zero. LEAF can deliver billions of dollars to this cause in the coming decade. The participants are paying for reduced emissions from deforestation, in addition to cutting own emissions. We have seen countries and companies step up their climate ambitions to meet a net zero future. Now it's the time to turn these ambitions into action.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I thank the organizers for inviting me at the second Partnering for Green Growth and Global Goals P4G Summit. Despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic with its many challenges, we have the opportunity to build back better through inclusive green recovery and green growth. Water, an area of work for P4G, is one of the most valuable assets of Bangladesh. So, we have adopted a 100-year sustainable development plan named Delta Plan 2100 that focuses on efficient use and preservation of water. Bangladesh is the first LDC to establish a climate change trust fund with its own resources. Every year we spend about $5 billion on climate adaptation and mitigation measures. Bangladesh, a member of the P4G, pursues a low carbon development path. Our National Solar Energy Action Plan 2021-2041 predicts a generation of up to 40 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2041. Bangladesh, the second largest exporter of ready-made garments, is exploring efficient options of circular fashion and textiles as part of overall circular economy. As the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum CBF and the host of the South Asian Office of Global Center on Adaptation, Bangladesh's key focus is to uphold the interests of the climate vulnerable countries and promote locally led adaptation solutions. I would like to conclude putting forward a few suggestions. Number one, P4G needs to campaign more about its action-oriented approach, engaging more financiers, innovators, policymakers, and creative entrepreneurs in the 5 P4G focus areas and share the best practices. Number two, for achieving Green Growth and Global Goals 2030, in addition to whole of society approach, a whole of world attitude is needed. And number three, we, the participating leaders in the P4G summit need to work more closely towards a greener future for our next generation. I thank you all.
I would like to thank President Moon for organizing this P4G summit, another milestone on our path to the COP26 summit in Glasgow later this year. Together, state and non-state actors must seize this one-in-a-generation opportunity to change gears towards a climate-proof future. Spain has decided to rise to the challenge, putting ecological transition at the core of its policymaking. Allow me to share with you three messages. First, we must raise the level of ambition. Commitments to climate neutrality by 2050 should be the new normal. And for this to happen, we must convince ourselves that this is a path full of opportunities. Investing in energy transition technologies can create close to 3 times more jobs than doing so in fossil fuels. In Spain, the National Energy and Climate Plan estimates that more than 230 billion euros will be mobilized over the next decade, creating between 250,000 and 350,000 jobs. Furthermore, our new COVID recovery plan will mobilize up to 140 billion euros over the next 6 years. And nearly 40% of those funds will be allocated to ecological transition-related investments. Second, strong regulatory frameworks must secure our climate ambition. This is why we have just approved our Climate Change and Energy Transition Bill, which enshrines into law the objective of climate neutrality by 2050. And third, the climate transition must be fair and inclusive. The Spanish Just Transition Strategy ensures that the ecological transition of our economy leaves no one behind. Through channeling investments and supporting innovative industrial projects, we can create green jobs and opportunities in those areas where decarbonization is taking a bigger toll. Collaboration among actors is the only way forward. Let me share a brilliant example with you. The Smart Green project, led by LG Electronics Spain, is planning to plant 47 million trees a year in our country thanks to a close partnership with local authorities, schools, and elderly homes. Dear friends, initiatives such as this P4G summit and its Seoul declaration that bring together businesses, government, and civil society organizations are key to finding together the strategies and tools we need to overcome what has been defined as the existential threat of our time. The time to act is now. The way to do it is together. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin by thanking President Moon for hosting this important and timely event. Sweden aims to become the first fossil-free welfare state and climate neutral by 2045. This is an ambitious goal, but there is no alternative. Becoming climate neutral requires cooperation. Cooperation between politicians, industry, business, academia, and civil society. The technology shift requires social dialogue and retraining opportunities. Let me share with you a concrete example of the public and the private sector working together to reduce emissions. Fossil-Free Sweden is a government initiative that brings together Swedish companies, municipalities, and regions to share ideas on how to reduce emissions and propose measures to achieve the goal of climate neutrality. We are witnessing a huge shift in industry with, for example, the cement industry and mineral industry taking steps to go green. Emissions are not confined by borders, and this is why we need to scale up cooperation regionally and globally. We must implement the Paris Agreement and achieve the 1.5-degree goal. We must also scale up public-private partnerships globally. And this was the reasoning when Sweden and India launched the Leadership Group for Industry Transition, establishing a global arena for public-private collaboration. And with the United States on board, the momentum for industry transition is growing even stronger. My message today is this: green growth is not only possible, it is profitable, and it's happening right now. It's also happening in Korea. I would like to mention the Sweden-Korea Green Transition Alliance that was launched in May. 13 major Swedish companies in Korea will work with Korean partners to promote fossil-free competitiveness in the Republic of Korea. I invite all business leaders to take part in our common efforts to tackle climate change and all political leaders to enable these efforts. Let's do everything we can to ensure we're all on that path ahead of COP26.
Es un verdadero honor participar en esta cumbre liderada por uno de los países que ha estado muy de cerca apoyando a El Salvador, Corea. Con la pandemia, millones de negocios pequeños y medianos en todo el mundo fueron afectados, mientras que las grandes empresas aumentaron sus ganancias exponencialmente. La pandemia por sí misma no solo trajo una gran catástrofe humana y de salud pública, sino que también económica. Cientos de millones de personas han entrado en la pobreza. Pero al mismo tiempo, los más ricos del mundo se hicieron mucho más ricos. El mundo es más desigual ahora que antes de la pandemia. Los grandes líderes del mundo tienen la responsabilidad y la obligación de corregir esta infamia del sistema, que permite que los más pobres sean cada vez más pobres, al mismo tiempo que los ricos se hacen más ricos, especialmente en una crisis como esta. Si realmente queremos resolver estos problemas, debemos tener el coraje necesario para eliminar las desigualdades que se han incrementado con la pandemia. Si las cosas siguen como están, dentro de 10 años habrá más desigualdad que ahora, porque el sistema ya se configuró así. Debemos hacer dos cosas. Uno, en cuanto a la salud, es necesario garantizar el acceso universal, gratuito y al corto plazo a las vacunas. Y dos, en cuanto a la economía, necesitamos que los países, bancos multilaterales y organismos económicos internacionales implementen políticas para detener el incremento galopante de esta desigualdad y tratar de revertirla, primero para lograr regresar a los niveles antes de la pandemia y luego empezar a construir una economía más inclusiva sin las injusticias que se han incrementado. Debemos evitar que las medidas afecten más a los que antes ya eran vulnerables. No veamos simplemente los números. Los más necesitados no resuelven sus carencias con estadísticas. Estamos ante un escenario único. No basta con que las personas más ricas y poderosas tengan la voluntad de ayudar a los más necesitados. No basta con limosna y caridades. Necesitamos que los estados implementen políticas públicas que resuelvan las injusticias estructurales del sistema económico mundial. Esto haría una diferencia enorme en la realidad que ahora viven millones de personas en todo el mundo. Debemos ser responsables, ser coherentes y garantizar el bienestar de nuestros pueblos. Hoy, nuestros países deben unir esfuerzos para generar nuevas formas económicas, más incluyentes, que no dejen atrás a nadie. Es momento de garantizar que la recuperación económica post-pandémica incluya a todas. Porque solo juntos podemos superar esta crisis y sus consecuencias. Que Dios los bendiga.
Dear President Moon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we all know that we are at a crossroads in climate policy. We also know what needs to be done. We must move from ambitious commitments to ambitious action. Earlier this year, the Adaptation Summit and the President Biden's Leaders Summit on climate showed that we are heading towards the right direction. Finland aims to be the first welfare state to become climate neutral in 2035. The European Union is making its 2030 and 2050 targets legally binding. Our host, the Republic of Korea, has shown climate leadership, not least in announcing to end coal financing in third countries. More is still needed from all of us. We need ambitious, nationally determined contributions before Glasgow. Governments also need to work more closely with business and civil society. As an Arctic country, Finland is particularly worried about the Arctic region, which is now warming 3 times faster than the global average. We are committed to maintaining climate issues at the core of Arctic cooperation. Reducing black carbon and methane emissions is essential both regionally and globally. As I have often said, if we lose the Arctic, we lose the globe. Economic policies and carbon pricing are at the heart of climate action. I want to stress the importance of the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action, co-chaired by Finland and Indonesia. The growing coalition was honored to welcome the Republic of Korea, the US, Japan, and many others as new members in its spring meeting. Our gathering today is an important milestone on the path towards Glasgow and beyond. The focus areas of this P4G summit, water, energy, circular economy, food and agriculture, and cities, are vital to make our planet climate neutral by 2050. Let us act now.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. When we first set out on our decade of action, we knew that the obstacles that faced us were already great. The developed and developing worlds were truly that. They were separate worlds. One world made up of wealthy, highly developed nations dragged their feet. Enriched by industrial carbon emissions and resource extraction, they were reluctant to wean themselves from the very pillage and profit that had enriched them. Meanwhile, in the other world, most post-colonial societies were hindered by exclusive economic policies and held back by a high cost of borrowing to fund foundational development of our countries. Undaunted, we fought to overcome these obstacles. We strove to provide our people with basic necessities, with roads, with bridges, schools, clean water, electricity, and affordable housing. We worked to lay the groundwork for the type of economic growth and prosperity boasted by our richer neighbors. But time and time again, we watch helplessly as the hard-fought progress we achieve is destroyed by a changing climate. We can ignite flames of hope and progress, but in the blink of an eye, that light can be extinguished. Then as we reeled from one crisis, we were dealt with another. As COVID-19 swept across the globe over the past year, our two worlds have been left feeling a universe apart. Vaccines, rather than serving as a political healer, have been weaponized as diplomatic leverage. More privileged, richer nations are reopening their economies and regaining normalcy, as developing ones are left without equitable access to vaccines while we contend with new waves and more contagious variants. It's safe to say that the past year, or perhaps the last millennium, has been defined not by inclusivity, but by self-interest. While the global recovery from COVID-19 presents an immense challenge, it also poses an immense opportunity. An opportunity to finally bridge the divide that has only been deepened by climate change and contagion. The funding of green job creation, the transition to net zero shipping fleets, the establishment of clean energy production, the mass expansion of carbon sinks, the cultivation of climate-conscious industries like fishing and agriculture, and perhaps most importantly, the exchange of debts for the deliverance of green and bluer development. And I encourage all leaders and climate champions at this year's P4G Summit to challenge yourself and challenge each other, not to allow us to fall back to the status quo. Thank you.
The Ministry of Economic of Mexico is very happy to be able to participate in this 2021 P4G Seoul Summit and to address the distinguished participants with this message. I would like to take this opportunity to share with the P4G community that since last January, this ministry is responsible for leading the national efforts to reach the 2030 Agenda goals. For us, it makes good environmental and economic and business sense to have the 2030 Agenda with the Ministry of Economic. So let me share with you that Mexico, it is one of the few countries that has made the move to include under one single economical institutional umbrella the economic, environmental, and sustainable agenda. We consider this to be a decisive step in encouraging a better economic development that leads us to green and sustainable energies and industries. But to do so properly, we need to advance in such a way that we include those people, sectors, and regions which have been traditionally underrepresented in economic and development. This includes micro, small, and medium-sized companies that are led by women, by indigenous people, young entrepreneurs, and also the people that live on the south and the southeast of our country. These actions and the actions we have been developing in the framework of the P4G Alliance intend to reach a wider audience with important projects aimed to addressing the Sustainable Development Goals and doing so in an inclusive way, especially leaving no one behind. For instance, projects such as Getting to Zero Coalition, Partnership to Reduce Food Loss and Waste in Mexico, and Halving Food Loss and Waste are three projects which received support from P4G to be implemented in Mexico and are especially aimed to the food and agricultural sectors. These are examples of effective and successful synergies between enterprises and non-governmental organizations in developing successful and high-impact inclusive projects. It is our desire that new partnerships flourish and continue to create opportunities for more Mexican companies and NGOs that could share innovative projects with other countries with support from the federal government. We are convinced that private sector support is essential to move together towards sustainable development. In the Mexican case, the participation of the Business Coordination Council, CCE, the Global Compact, and other related actors have been crucial for advancing in these proposed objectives. We still have a lot to do, so I want to call for more companies and NGOs to seriously consider becoming part of the P4G partnership projects and help us work towards a green plan of recovery. Thank you all in the P4G community, and I wish you a successful summit.
Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Honorable President Moon Jae-in, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first of all start by thanking the Republic of Korea for hosting this P4G conference. I think it is a very important landmark in our pathway towards green growth as well as sustainable development for the future. Especially during the COVID era, which has challenged the whole world, we have all realized that we cannot fight with nature. We have to make nature an ally of development. And I think that is the only model which can work as we go into the 21st century. In Pakistan, we realized this during the COVID era, and we announced what was called the Green Stimulus. This was a stimulus which was aimed at both protecting nature as well as providing green jobs. The idea was to put the country onto a pathway of green development and green growth. During the COVID era, this green stimulus was focused on three things. Firstly, we had the 10 billion tree plantation initiative in place, and we pushed it further to create more green jobs for people who were out there in nature, creating nurseries, protecting forests from wildfire, and protecting and nurturing forests towards natural regeneration. And we have a target of restoring over 1 million hectares of forest by 2023. Secondly, we started expanding our protected area network during the COVID era. We had 30 national parks in Pakistan, which were built over the last 70 years. And we increased them by 50% and took them to 45 national parks. So added another 15 national parks in a period of only 8 or 9 months. Again, it was linked with green jobs for our youth, and we focused on starting a national park service where our young people could get employed as nature guardians. Thirdly, we initiated what is called the Recharge Pakistan project. This is a project which tries to turn a crisis into an opportunity. We have flood waters that flow through Pakistan every year, and this project aims at using that flood water and diverting it towards our degrading wetlands, so it restores the wetlands and also recharges the aquifer which is depleting. So all three are nature-based solutions, all three provide green jobs, and all three provide us with a framework for green growth. At this time, we have created over 85,000 green jobs, and we are hoping that by the end of the year, we are going to add another 100,000 green jobs through these three initiatives. So Excellencies, Pakistan is really focused on green growth, and this partnership for green growth is something that we really cherish, and we think this can be a very useful platform for the 21st century. Secondly, I think it is very important that the economic framework of the 20th century is not going to take us to the 21st century. We have to change the economic framework. We have to bring nature into the equation. Pakistan believes in this, and Pakistan is making efforts to make this happen. We have set up an ecosystem restoration fund, which has already got an endowment of $180 million being spent towards nature protection. We have last week launched our first green Euro bond, a $500 million green Euro bond to support our hydropower development. It was oversubscribed 4 times, which means there is an appetite in the market for not only economic progress, but green economic progress. And thirdly, we are in consultation with a lot of countries, creditor countries, on a debt for nature swap. So we would like our debt to be relaxed, and on our part, we will ensure transparently and credibly that we are investing that money in nature protection. So these are the innovative financial instruments that we are doing, and we are also doing a natural capital valuation of our economy in Pakistan. So all this is the framework which I think is the framework which has to take us to the 21st century. Nature has to, as I said, be a part of the equation. Finally, I would like to thank the Republic of Korea again for hosting this very important conference, and our Prime Minister Imran Khan especially supports this platform, and he has sent a message of solidarity with the P4G platform. Thank you very much.
Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the global economy is experiencing its deepest recession since the end of World War II. The impacts on developing countries have been the most severe, with an increase in food insecurity, unemployment, and 500 million more people falling below the poverty line. To stimulate economies and mitigate the impact of COVID-19, governments are undertaking large-scale expansionary fiscal measures. But announced spending to boost recovery in developed countries last year was 17 times greater on a per capita basis than in developing countries. Developing countries are faced with rising debts and limited fiscal space to finance urgent climate action. The good news is that climate-oriented packages can support economic recovery, create jobs, reduce emissions, and strengthen the resilience of communities. The IMF suggests that a world green stimulus of 0.8% of GDP annually between 2020 and 2030 would both accelerate the emissions reduction path and increase global growth recovery by about 0.6% of GDP annually. But the bad news is that so far, the recovery is not green. Early findings suggest that in the 50 largest economies, only 18% of recovery spending and only 2.5% of total spending are expected to enhance sustainability. So, what can we do to ensure that the world uses COVID-19 recovery measures to shift the economic paradigm toward low-emission, climate-resilient pathways? Here are 4 actions which the Green Climate Fund is promoting to support a green recovery in developing countries. First, fostering policy integration between climate action, sustainable development, and COVID-19 stimulus measures to minimize investment requirement and optimize development co-benefits. Second, exploring innovative financing instruments to create some fiscal space to finance their green climate resilient recovery plans, such as a debt moratorium and debt for climate swaps. Third, leveraging sovereign and multi-country guarantee funds to reduce investment risk and catalyze private investment. And finally, fourth, increasing developing countries' access to long-term affordable finance through greater access to green bond markets and private equity. Delivering this on a global scale will require coordinated international efforts, including a renewed commitment to deliver on the promise to mobilize over $100 billion in annual climate finance by 2020. The Green Climate Fund, as the world's largest climate fund for developing countries, stands ready to support the ambitious measures needed to ensure a green climate resilient recovery. Thank you very much for your attention.
Everyone here today shares a common understanding. In order to slow climate change, the world must come together to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And we must move forward with bold climate action now. Achieving this vision may seem daunting, but we know it is achievable. And done right, it will yield multiple benefits for people, the economy, and the planet. What will it take to reach this goal? We need deployment of zero carbon energy technologies at unprecedented speed and scale. We need to rapidly expand the availability of solar and wind power. Unabated coal plants will need to be phased out in advanced economies by 2030 and globally by 2040. We need a major push to expand energy efficiency. We need to transform global transportation systems. We will need to move away from fossil fuels fast. A recent report from the World Resources Institute found that to achieve a net zero economy, we will need to deploy renewables 6 times faster, phase out coal power 5 times faster, transition to electric vehicles 22 times faster, and immediately halt deforestation. This effort must be all in, everyone in. We need national governments to raise their sights and their ambition. So far, nearly 60 countries, representing over half of all global emissions, have set net zero targets. But we need the remaining large emitters to align around this goal. We cannot stop there. Without clear, actionable plans in the near term for 2030, these long-term goals will be useless. When we say all in, everyone in, we mean businesses too. We need the corporate sector to quickly and aggressively decrease their emissions. More than 1,400 companies have already adopted science-based emissions targets, but we need many more to get on board. Leading businesses understand that taking action is not only good for the planet, it's also good for for their bottom line. And the government and private sector must work together through innovative partnerships to bridge the gap between how far we have come and how much further we need to go. This is where a unique platform like P4G can play a truly distinct role. With its model of bringing together the public and private sector to join forces for impact, it can unlock the finance needed to scale climate solutions. The P4G Summit is our moment. We have a shared responsibility and a shared opportunity to speed the transition to a safe, zero-carbon future. Thank you.
We have listened to the speeches of leaders from more than 50 countries and international organizations on the three themes of green recovery, carbon neutrality, and public-private cooperation. How have you enjoyed it?
Thank you, Ambassador. It was fascinating and hugely encouraging. We are at a tipping point or turning point in our fight against climate change. Depending on the decision to be taken by global leaders in the coming years, we are either to entrench our dependence on fossil fuels or to achieve our net zero emission target. These pose a dramatic responsibility on all of us, and I'm deeply convinced that this summit is a key step for the entire community to be able to fulfill this responsibility.
Thank you, Angel. It was exciting to see all those commitments and pledges from the leaders. Of course, now we need to see this followed up by action, because green we go for action now.
Once again, we have been reminded that the messages from the leaders resonate with the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit's slogan, Green we go, change we make. Frank and Yannick, thank you so much indeed again for joining us today to offer your insights. Thank you, gentlemen. And with that, we will now conclude the Leaders Session 1 of the P4G Seoul Summit with the Prime Minister's closing remarks.
오늘 귀한 시간 내주신 각국 정상과 국제기구 대표 여러분께 다시 한번 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 오늘 우리는 지구의 미래가 우리의 행동에 달려있다는 엄중한 현실에 공감했습니다. 또한 녹색 회복과 탄소 중립 실현을 위한 각국의 비전과 국제적 연대 의지도 재확인했습니다. 오늘 여러분의 참여와 약속이 인류의 미래, 지구의 미래를 위한 의미 있는 발걸음이 될 것이라고 믿습니다. 앞으로도 우리가 함께 이루어 나갈 정의로운 전환에 더 많은 국제적 협력과 실천 의지가 모이길 기대합니다. 오늘 회의에 참여하고 또 준비해 주신 모든 분들께 진심으로 고맙다는 말씀을 드립니다. 감사합니다.